The marriage bargain that shattered an empire. When Eliza Thornfield walked into Lord Cassian Blackmore's study that frozen December morning, she had nothing left to lose. Her father was dead. Her reputation was in tatters. And the most feared man in the territory, a lord known for destroying anyone who crossed him, had just offered her a choice: marry him immediately or be cast into the streets before nightfall. What happened next would shake the foundations of frontier society and prove that sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't power. It's a woman with nothing left to fear. If you want to see how this desperate deal transforms into something no one could have predicted, stay until the very end. And don't forget to hit that like button and tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. The December wind cut through Thornfield House like a blade through silk, sharp, merciless, and thorough. Eliza stood in what had been her father's study, surrounded by the debris of a life that had crumbled in less than a month. Account books lay scattered across the mahogany desk, their pages filled with numbers that told a story of slow financial hemorrhaging. Creditor notices were stacked in neat, damning piles. And in the center of it all sat a single letter, sealed with black wax, bearing the crest she'd learned to recognize with a mixture of dread and bitter fascination. The Blackmore seal. She didn't need to open it to know what it contained. Lord Cassian Blackmore didn't send social correspondence. He sent ultimatums. Miss Thornfield, the housekeeper's voice trembled from the doorway. Mrs. Henshaw had been with the family for 20 years, but even her loyalty was wearing thin under the weight of unpaid wages and uncertain futures. There's a gentleman here to see you. Eliza looked up from the letter, her green eyes sharp despite the exhaustion that pressed against her bones. Gentlemen? Mrs. Henshaw, we both know there are no gentlemen left in this territory who would voluntarily cross our threshold. The older woman's face flushed. It's Lord Blackmore, miss. He's waiting in the drawing room. He says— She swallowed hard. He says it's urgent. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Eliza gripped the edge of the desk, her knuckles white against the dark wood. Cassian Blackmore. Here, in her home. Tell him I'll be down in 5 minutes. Miss, your dress? 5 minutes, Mrs. Henshaw? The housekeeper fled. Eliza remained standing, her breathing measured and deliberate. She knew what she looked like, a woman in mourning clothes that had seen too many days of wear, her dark hair pulled back in a severe knot, her face pale from too little sleep and too much worry. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman on the edge of ruin. But she'd be damned if she'd let Cassian Blackmore see her cower. She descended the stairs with her spine straight and her chin high, every step a deliberate act of defiance against the reality closing in around her. The drawing room door stood open. Through it, she could see him, tall, dark-haired, standing with his back to her as he examined the paintings on the wall with the casual interest of a man considering a purchase, which, she supposed, was exactly what this was. Lord Blackmore. Her voice came out steady, controlled, a small victory. He turned, and for a moment she was struck by the sheer presence of him. Cassian Blackmore was not a handsome man in the conventional sense. His features were too sharp, too severe, his dark eyes too calculating. But he possessed something far more dangerous than beauty, absolute certainty. He moved through the world as though it had been constructed specifically to accommodate his will. Miss Thornfield. He inclined his head with the bare minimum of courtesy. Thank you for seeing me. As though I had a choice. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement of her directness. You always have choices, Miss Thornfield. The question is whether you have any good ones. She moved into the room but didn't sit, maintaining the distance between them like a tactical position. I assume you're here to discuss my father's debts. Among other things. He pulled a folded document from his coat. Your father owed me approximately £12,000. The estate as it stands is worth perhaps 6. The difference is problematic. Problematic. She repeated the word with dark amusement. What a delicate way to describe financial ruin. I prefer precision to dramatics, Miss Thornfield. And I prefer honesty to euphemism, Lord Blackmore. So let's be honest, shall we? You didn't come here to discuss repayment terms. You came here because you know I can't pay, and you want to see what you can extract from the wreckage. His eyes narrowed slightly, the first genuine reaction she'd drawn from him. You have a sharp tongue for a woman in your position. My position? And what position would that be? She took a step closer, anger overriding caution. The daughter of a dead man whose business partners abandoned him the moment his investment soured? A woman whose engagement was broken off 3 weeks ago because suddenly, mysteriously, rumors began circulating about her character? A woman who is about to lose her home because men like you see opportunity in desperation? The silence that followed was heavy enough to press the air from the room. Those rumors, Cassian said quietly, were not my doing. No? She laughed, sharp and bitter. How convenient that they emerged just as my father's debts to you came due. How fortunate for you that they destroyed my last chance at a respectable marriage, leaving me with no resources, no protection, and no options. You think I engineered your isolation? I think you benefit from it, which, in the territories, amounts to the same thing. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he nodded slowly. You're right, I do benefit, and I didn't stop the rumors when I could have, which makes me complicit in your current situation. Does that satisfy your need for honesty? The admission was so unexpected that it punctured her anger, leaving only exhaustion in its wake. She sank into the nearest chair, no longer caring about maintaining appearances. What do you want, Lord Blackmore? If you're here to take the house, take it. I'll be gone by morning. Where will you go? Does it matter? Answer the question. She met his gaze, refusing to look away. I have an aunt in the eastern settlements. She might take me in, or I'll find work as a governess, or companion, or... She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. They both knew what happened to unmarried women without resources or protection in the territories. The options were grim and grew grimmer with each passing year. Cassian moved to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. I have a proposal for you. I'm not interested in becoming your mistress, if that's what you're suggesting. He turned sharply. Is that what you think of me? I don't know what to think of you, Lord Blackmore. You're a stranger who holds my future in his hands. Forgive me if I don't assume the best of intentions. Fair enough. He pulled a second document from his coat. This is a marriage contract. If you sign it, you become Lady Blackmore. Your father's debts are forgiven. You maintain your position in society, and you gain the protection of my name and resources. The words hung in the air like smoke from a pistol shot. Eliza stared at him, certain she'd misheard. You're asking me to marry you. I'm offering you a solution to your current predicament. Why? The question came out sharper than she intended. Why would you want to marry me? You could have anyone. Why choose a woman with no dowry, no connections, and a reputation that's been systematically destroyed? Because you're intelligent enough to understand the terms of our arrangement. Because you won't harbor romantic delusions that will complicate matters. And because you have something I need, which is legitimacy. He said it simply, as though it were obvious. I'm wealthy, Miss Thornfield. I'm powerful. But I'm also the grandson of a coal merchant who bought his way into the peerage. Society tolerates me because they fear me and need my money. They don't respect me. They never will. But you're old blood. Your family came over on the second wave of settlement. Your lineage is impeccable. A marriage to you gives me something money can't buy. Social acceptance. Precisely. She should have been insulted. She should have thrown the contract in his face and ordered him from her house. Instead, she found herself considering it with the cold calculation of a woman who had learned, very quickly, that pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. What would you expect from this marriage? Discretion, loyalty, the appearance of a united front in public. He paused. I would not demand intimacy. We would maintain separate quarters. You would have your freedom within reasonable bounds. Reasonable bounds. She rose from the chair, moving to stand directly in front of him. At 5'7", she was tall for a woman, but he still towered over her. She tilted her head back to meet his eyes. Define reasonable. You would be Lady Blackmore. You would attend social functions at my side. You would manage the household. You would uphold the dignity of the family name. Beyond that, he shrugged, I have no interest in controlling your daily activities. And if I want to leave, if I decide this arrangement is intolerable, then we dissolve the marriage after 1 year. I'll provide you with an income sufficient to live independently. You'll be free. It was, she realized, a better offer than she had any right to expect, better than anything else available to her. And yet, I have conditions, she said. His eyebrow rose. You're in no position to negotiate. Then withdraw your offer. She held his gaze, refusing to blink. But understand this, Lord Blackmore. I may be desperate, but I'm not broken. If you want me to play the role of your wife, to give you the legitimacy you're buying, then I need something more than just the erasure of debt and a roof over my head. What do you want? My own income. Not an allowance, actual money that's mine to spend as I see fit, no questions asked. She began counting on her fingers. Access to the estate library and grounds without restriction. The right to decline social engagements if I choose. And most importantly, she stepped closer, close enough to see the faint scar that ran along his jawline. You will never lie to me. About anything. I don't care if you think the truth will hurt me or complicate matters. If I ask you a direct question, you give me a direct answer. Always. Silence stretched between them. Outside, she could hear the wind rattling the window panes, the old house creaking under winter's assault. Those are your terms, he asked finally. Those are my terms. And if I agree, then I'll sign your contract. He studied her face as though seeing her for the first time. You're not what I expected, Miss Thornfield. Disappointed? No. He pulled a pen from his pocket and handed it to her. I think you might be exactly what I need. She took the pen, her fingers steady despite the hammering of her heart. The contract was surprisingly straightforward. No hidden clauses, no legal traps that she could discern. Just a simple agreement. Marriage in exchange for security, companionship in exchange for status. She signed her name in firm, clear strokes. Cassian took the document, added his own signature below hers, then folded it precisely and returned it to his coat. We'll marry tomorrow. I've already made the arrangements. Tomorrow. She felt the ground shift beneath her. That's necessary. The longer we wait, the more opportunity for interference. Society will gossip regardless, but if we present them with a fait accompli, they'll have no choice but to accept it. You've thought of everything. I always do, Miss Thornfield. It's how I've survived. He moved toward the door, then paused. Pack only what you truly care about. Everything else can be replaced. Lord Blackmore? He turned back. Why didn't you stop the rumors? You said you could have. Why didn't you? He was quiet for a long moment. Because I needed you desperate enough to accept my proposal. And because I'm not a good man, Miss Thornfield, the sooner you understand that, the easier this will be for both of us. Then he was gone, leaving her alone in the drawing room with the ghost of her father's disappointment and the sharp, cold knowledge that she had just sold herself to survive. Mrs. Henshaw appeared in the doorway, her face anxious. Miss? What did he say? Eliza looked at the older woman, loyal, worried, facing unemployment because of debt she'd had no part in creating. Pack your things, Mrs. Henshaw. We're going to Blackmore Estate. You'll come with me as my personal attendant. Miss, I don't understand. I'm getting married tomorrow. To Lord Blackmore. She said it calmly, as though announcing a change in dinner plans. And I need someone I trust in that house. Will you come? The housekeeper's eyes widened, but she recovered quickly. Of course, miss. Of course I will. That night, Eliza stood in her bedroom, surrounded by half-packed trunks and the remnants of her old life. She should have been terrified. She should have been grieving. Instead, she felt only a strange, cold clarity. She had made her choice, not because she wanted to, but because it was the only choice that allowed her to remain standing. In the territories, survival wasn't pretty. It wasn't noble. It was simply necessary. And tomorrow she would walk into Cassian Blackmore's world with her eyes open and her spine straight. He thought he'd bought himself a convenient wife, a social accessory to smooth his path into respectable circles. He had no idea what he'd actually acquired. The marriage took place at dawn in the estate chapel, witnessed only by the magistrate and 2 servants. Eliza wore a simple gray dress, the closest thing to bridal she owned that wasn't mourning black. Cassian wore his usual severe black coat, his expression unreadable as the magistrate droned through the ceremony. When it came time for the vows, his voice was steady. I do. Hers was equally firm. I do. The magistrate pronounced them married. Cassian didn't kiss her. He simply offered his arm, and she took it, and together they walked out of the chapel, as Lord and Lady Blackmore. The carriage ride to Blackmore Estate took 2 hours. They sat in silence, the space between them carefully maintained, each lost in their own thoughts. Eliza watched the landscape change from the familiar rolling hills near Thornfield to the darker, more rugged terrain that surrounded Cassian's holdings. The estate itself sat on a promontory overlooking the river valley, a massive stone structure that looked more like a fortress than a home. "It's not welcoming," Cassian said, following her gaze. "I'm aware of that." "It's honest," she replied. "I can appreciate honesty." The carriage swept through iron gates and up a long drive lined with bare trees. Servants lined the entrance, at least 30 of them, all in perfect formation, all watching with barely concealed curiosity as the new Lady Blackmore emerged from the carriage. A tall, severe woman in black stepped forward. "Lord Blackmore." "My lady, I'm Mrs. Wardlow, the head housekeeper. Welcome home." "Mrs. Wardlow." Cassian's acknowledgement was brief. "This is Mrs. Henshaw, Lady Blackmore's personal attendant. See that she's given appropriate quarters." "Of course, my lord." Eliza caught the flash of displeasure in the housekeeper's eyes, the resentment of someone whose authority had just been circumvented. She filed the information away for later consideration. The interior of Blackmore Estate was as austere as its exterior. Dark wood paneling, heavy furniture, minimal decoration. Everything was expensive, everything was of the highest quality, but it all felt coldly impersonal, as though the house had been designed by someone who understood the concept of wealth, but not warmth. "I'll show you to your quarters," Cassian said, leading her up a grand staircase. "You'll have the ladies' suite. It connects to my rooms, but the door locks from your side. I won't disturb you." He opened a door, revealing a suite of rooms that were larger than her entire bedroom at Thornfield. The furniture was exquisite, clearly expensive, but arranged with the same impersonal precision that characterized the rest of the house. "If you need anything changed, tell Mrs. Wardlow," he continued. "She'll see to it." "Will she?" Eliza moved to the window, looking out over the grounds. "Or will she see it as an intrusion?" "She'll do as she's told." "That's not the same thing as cooperation, Lord Blackmore." He was quiet for a moment. "You're right, Mrs. Wardlow has been here for 15 years. She's set in her ways. If you have difficulty with her, let me know." "I can handle Mrs. Wardlow." She turned to face him. "What I need to know is what you expect from me. Today. This week. You said I'd manage the household, but I doubt your staff will accept direction from a woman they see as an interloper." "They'll accept direction because I'll tell them to. That will make them obey. It won't make them respect me." His eyes narrowed slightly. "What do you suggest?" "Give me time. And space. Let me observe before I act. Your household has functioned without a mistress for years. Rushing in with changes will only create resentment." "You're more strategic than I anticipated. I survived the territories alone for 4 weeks after my father died. I learned to think strategically." She met his gaze directly. "Which brings me to my next question. What do I call you? Lord Blackmore seems unnecessarily formal for a husband, but I somehow doubt you want me calling you Cassian. In public, Lord Blackmore is appropriate. In private—" He paused. "Cassian is fine. And what will you call me?" "Eliza, if that's acceptable." "It is." She removed her gloves slowly, finger by finger. "When do you expect me to make my first appearance in society as Lady Blackmore?" "The Ashford Ball is in 3 weeks. We'll attend together. That will serve as your formal introduction." 3 weeks? She nodded. "That gives me time to establish myself here first." He moved toward the connecting door between their suites. "One more thing, Eliza. The household staff. They're loyal to me. Some of them have been with me since I bought this estate. They'll be watching you, assessing whether you're a threat to their positions or the established order. Be careful." "Is that a warning or advice?" "Both." He opened the door. "Dinner is at 8, unless you'd prefer to eat in your rooms tonight. I'll come down. If we're going to convince society this marriage is real, we should probably be able to tolerate eating a meal together." The ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Fair point. Until tonight, then." He left. Eliza stood in the center of her new rooms, surrounded by expensive furniture and silk curtains and all the trappings of wealth, and felt more alone than she had in the empty halls of Thornfield. But she hadn't accepted this bargain to feel comfortable. She'd accepted it to survive. And if there was one thing Eliza Thornfield knew how to do, it was survive. Mrs. Henshaw appeared an hour later, looking overwhelmed. "Miss, my lady, I should say, your trunks have arrived. Mrs. Wardlow wants to know if you'll need additional staff to help unpack." "No, just you." Eliza turned from the window. "What did Mrs. Wardlow say about you?" The older woman's face flushed. She made it clear that I'm only here on your insistence, that my position is provisional." "Did she?" Eliza's voice went cold. "And what exactly does she think will happen if she makes your position untenable?" "My lady, I don't want to cause trouble." "You're not causing trouble, Mrs. Henshaw. You're my attendant, appointed by me, answerable only to me. If Mrs. Wardlow has a problem with that, she can take it up with Lord Blackmore, but I suspect she won't." "Why not, my lady?" Eliza smiled, sharp and thin. "Because she's smart enough to know that challenging me directly, this early, would force Lord Blackmore to take a side, and she's not certain which side he'd choose. So she'll wait and watch and test my boundaries gradually, which means we have time to establish ourselves." Mrs. Henshaw stared at her. "You've changed, my lady, since your father—" "Yes, I have." Eliza began unpacking one of the trunks herself, her movements efficient. The woman who lived at Thornfield was a girl playing at being adult. The woman who signed a marriage contract yesterday knows exactly what world she lives in. That evening, she dressed for dinner with care. Not her finest gown, that would seem like she was trying too hard, but a dark green silk that emphasized her eyes and spoke of understated elegance. Mrs. Henshaw arranged her hair in a simple knot, with just a few strategic tendrils to soften the severe style. When she descended the stairs at precisely 8 o'clock, Cassian was waiting in the entrance hall. He had changed into evening clothes, and for the first time she saw him as society must see him, powerful, commanding, and absolutely impenetrable. "You look well," he said, offering his arm. "Thank you. As do you." They walked to the dining room in silence. The table was set for two, placed at opposite ends of a surface that could easily seat 20. The distance was almost comical. Eliza stopped. "This is absurd." Cassian looked at her. "What is?" "This." She gestured at the table. "We're having a conversation across 12 feet of polished oak. It's ridiculous. It's traditional. It's wasteful." She moved to the chair immediately to his right. "If we're going to eat together, we might as well be able to hear each other without shouting." For a moment she thought he'd argue. Then he nodded to the waiting footman. "Adjust the settings." The servant scrambled to rearrange the table. Within minutes, they were seated properly, close enough for normal conversation. The first course was served, a delicate soup that Eliza barely tasted. "Tell me about the Ashford ball," she said. "What should I expect?" Cassian set down his spoon with precision. "Lady Ashford is the doyenne of territorial society. She decides who's accepted and who's not. The ball is her annual demonstration of that power." "And you're invited?" "I'm tolerated." "There's a difference." "Why tolerated?" "Because I hold mortgages on half the estates that will be represented there, including the Ashford property." He said it without inflection, but she caught the bitter edge beneath. "They need my money. They don't need to like me." "And they don't like you because—" "Because I'm the grandson of a man who spent his youth covered in coal dust. Because I bought my way into their circles instead of being born into them. Because I refuse to pretend I'm something I'm not." Eliza studied him across the table. "That must be exhausting." "What must?" "Being surrounded by people who despise you but can't afford to show it." He was quiet for a long moment. "You're the first person to understand that." "I'm the first person you've been honest with about it." "Perhaps." The second course arrived, roasted pheasant with winter vegetables. Eliza cut into the meat, considering her next words carefully. "When I walk into that ballroom on your arm," she said, "they're going to see me as either your greatest vulnerability or your greatest weapon. Which would you prefer?" Cassian's hand stilled over his wineglass. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I can play the role of the poor, desperate girl who married you for money. I can let them pity me and, by extension, diminish you. Or—" She met his eyes. "I can walk in there as though I chose you, as though this marriage is exactly what I wanted. I can make them wonder what you have that made a Thornfield willing to align herself with you. The second option would make you a target. I'm already a target. At least this way, I'm a target who chose her position. He lifted his wine glass, studying her over the rim. You surprised me, Eliza. Good. I'd hate to be predictable. The rest of the meal passed in relative silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Less hostile, more contemplative. When the final course was cleared, Cassian stood. I have work in my study. Unless you'd prefer company in the drawing room? No, I'm tired. She rose as well. Thank you for dinner. Eliza? She turned back. What you said about the ball, about making them wonder, that would require you to be convincing, to appear as though you… He trailed off. As though I care for you. She finished the sentence he couldn't. I'm aware. Consider it part of our bargain, Cassian. You gave me security. I'll give you legitimacy. And if that requires me to act as though I chose you freely, then that's what I'll do. She left him standing there and returned to her rooms where Mrs. Henshaw waited to help her undress. How was dinner, my lady? Interesting. Eliza sat at the vanity, watching as Mrs. Henshaw unpinned her hair. Tell me, what are the servants saying about the marriage? The older woman hesitated. They're confused. Lord Blackmore has never shown interest in marriage before. Some think you must have something he desperately needs. Others wonder if there's affection involved. And what do you think? I think you're the smartest person in this house, my lady, and I think Lord Blackmore is smart enough to recognize that. Eliza smiled at her reflection. Then we'll get along just fine. That night, alone in her vast bed, Eliza lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of her new home. Somewhere in the distance, a door closed. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. The wind rattled the windows. She thought about Cassian, alone in his own rooms on the other side of the connecting door. She thought about the marriage they'd entered into, cold, calculated, devoid of sentiment. She thought about the society that would judge them, the staff that would test her, the future that stretched ahead like a battlefield. And she felt, for the first time since her father's death, something like hope. Not because she believed in happy endings, not because she thought this arrangement would transform into something more, but because she had survived the worst, had made the hardest choice, and was still standing. In the territories, that was more than most people could say. She would make this work. She would claim her place in Cassian's world. And if society wanted to judge her for it, let them. She had nothing left to lose, which meant she had everything to gain. Tomorrow she would begin the real work. Learning the rhythms of this house, mapping the allegiances of its staff, and preparing herself for the role she'd chosen to play. Tonight, she would sleep. And when she woke, she would wake as Lady Blackmore, a title she hadn't been born to, but one she was determined to earn. The first week at Blackmore Estate passed in a careful dance of observation and restraint. Eliza moved through the corridors like a ghost, watching, learning, saying little. She attended meals with Cassian, breakfast at 7, dinner at 8, where they exchanged polite pleasantries and careful questions, circling each other like duelists, assessing range and reach. The staff watched her with barely concealed suspicion. Mrs. Wardlow maintained her frosty politeness, answering Eliza's questions with technical precision while offering nothing beyond what was explicitly asked. The maids curtsied when she passed but avoided eye contact. The footman treated her with the distant courtesy reserved for temporary guests who would soon be gone. Only Mrs. Henshaw remained loyal, and even she seemed diminished in this vast, cold house, her cheerful efficiency from Thornfield replaced by nervous caution. "They're waiting for you to fail," Mrs. Henshaw whispered one morning as she helped Eliza dress. "Mrs. Wardlow especially. She told the kitchen staff that you wouldn't last a month." "Did she?" Eliza's voice was flat. "And what makes her so certain?" "She says Lord Blackmore has never needed a wife before, that he married you for appearances, and once you've served your purpose at a few social functions, you'll be set aside." Eliza studied her reflection in the mirror, pale face, dark hair, green eyes that had learned to hide everything. "Tell me about Mrs. Wardlow. How long has she been here?" 15 years, my lady, since before Lord Blackmore bought the estate. She came with the property, so to speak. The previous owner recommended her, and Lord Blackmore kept her on. So her loyalty is to the house, not the man. I I suppose so, yes. Eliza turned from the mirror. And the cook? The butler? The rest of the staff? Most were hired by Mrs. Wardlow. They're competent, but Mrs. Henshaw hesitated. They take their direction from her, my lady, not from Lord Blackmore directly. Interesting. Eliza stood, smoothing her skirts. Very interesting. She found Cassian in his study, surrounded by ledgers and correspondence. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his features. Eliza, is something wrong? That depends on your perspective. She closed the door behind her. Tell me about Mrs. Wardlow. His expression shuddered immediately. What about her? How much authority does she have in this household? She manages the staff, oversees daily operations, maintains the accounts, standard duties for a head housekeeper. And when was the last time you personally reviewed those accounts? His silence was answer enough. Eliza moved to the window, looking out over the grounds. She's been stealing from you. Not much, small amounts, carefully dispersed. Nothing obvious enough to raise alarm. But it's there. That's a serious accusation. It's an observation based on 15 years of watching my father's household accounts. She turned to face him. Mrs. Wardlow has been here since before you owned this estate. Her loyalty is to the house, to the way things have always been done. Not to you, and certainly not to me. She sees us both as interlopers. Cassian set down his pen very carefully. You've been here a week and you've already uncovered embezzlement? I haven't uncovered anything yet. I'm simply telling you where to look. She returned to the desk, placing both hands on its surface. But that's not why I'm here. I need to know something. Do you actually want me to manage this household, or was that just part of the contract we signed? What kind of question is that? A direct one, the kind you promised to answer honestly. She held his gaze. Because right now your staff sees me as a decorative addition. Someone who'll attend balls and host dinners but won't actually change anything. If that's what you want, fine. I'll play that role. But if you meant what you said about me managing things, then I need your explicit support. Not just permission, support. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. What would that support look like? A statement to the staff today, making it clear that I have full authority over household operations, and that anyone who undermines that authority answers to you directly. That will make you very unpopular. I'm already unpopular, Cassian. I'd rather be unpopular and effective than unpopular and powerless. A slow smile crossed his face, the first genuine one she'd seen. You really are extraordinary. I'm practical. There's a difference. She straightened. So, will you support me or not? I'll call a household meeting for this afternoon. You'll address the staff directly, with me present. He stood, moving around the desk. But Eliza, if you're going to challenge Mrs. Wardlow's authority, you'd better be prepared for the consequences. She won't submit gracefully. I don't need her to submit gracefully. I just need her to submit. The meeting took place in the main hall at 3 o'clock. The entire household staff assembled, 32 people ranging from the senior butler down to the scullery maids. They stood in careful ranks, faces neutral, eyes watchful. Mrs. Wardlow stood at the front, her expression placid, but her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Cassian spoke first, his voice carrying through the space with absolute authority. You all know Lady Blackmore. As of today, she assumes full management of household operations. All decisions regarding staff, supplies, schedules, and expenditures go through her. Mrs. Wardlow will continue as head housekeeper, but she now reports to Lady Blackmore. Is that understood? A murmur rippled through the assembled staff. Mrs. Wardlow's face remained carefully blank. My lady? Cassian stepped aside, ceding the floor to Eliza. She moved forward, her spine straight, her voice calm and clear. I know this is a change. I know some of you are uncertain about what it means, so let me be direct. I'm not here to disrupt a functioning household. I'm here to ensure it continues functioning at the highest level. That means supporting those of you who do excellent work in addressing any problems that arise. She let her gaze sweep across the assembled faces. I also know that some of you doubt whether I'll remain at Blackmore Estate, whether this marriage is permanent. Let me address that concern directly. I am Lady Blackmore. This is my home. And I have no intention of going anywhere. The sooner we all accept that reality, the easier things will be. My lady, Mrs. Wardlow's voice cutting through the silence, sharp as ice. If I may ask a question? Of course. What experience do you have managing an estate of this size? Thornfield House, if I recall, was considerably smaller. The challenge was blatant. Several of the younger servants gasped. Eliza saw Cassian tense beside her, ready to intervene. She raised a hand slightly, stopping him. You're absolutely right, Mrs. Wardlow. Thornfield was smaller. It also operated on a fraction of Blackmore's budget, which meant every penny had to be accounted for precisely. Every supplier had to be negotiated with carefully. Every staff member had to perform multiple roles. I learned efficiency through necessity. She paused. I also learned how to identify waste, which brings me to my first directive. I'll be reviewing all household accounts from the past year. I expect full cooperation from everyone involved in those expenditures. Mrs. Wardlow's face went very still. My lady, those accounts have already been reviewed by Lord Blackmore's man of business. Then a second review won't be a problem. Eliza's smile was pleasant, her voice deadly. Unless there's something you'd prefer I didn't see. The silence that followed was absolute. No, my lady, Mrs. Wardlow said finally. Nothing at all. Excellent. Then we understand each other. Eliza addressed the full staff again. I'll be meeting with each department head individually over the next week. Please be prepared to discuss your operations in detail, that's all. You're dismissed. The staff filed out, whispering among themselves. Mrs. Wardlow remained frozen in place, her face a mask of controlled fury. When the last servant had left, Cassian turned to Eliza. That was either brilliant or catastrophic. I'm not sure which. It was necessary. She watched through the window as Mrs. Wardlow crossed the courtyard, her posture rigid with anger. She'll either fall in line or force a confrontation. Either way, the uncertainty ends. And if she chooses confrontation, then I'll deal with it. That night, Eliza lay awake listening to the sounds of the house settling around her. Somewhere below, a door opened and closed. Footsteps echoed in the servants' corridors. She thought about Mrs. Wardlow, about the battle lines being drawn, about the precarious position she'd placed herself in. She'd made an enemy today, deliberately, publicly, but she'd also established something more important. She was not going to be ignored. The next morning brought the first test. Eliza came down to breakfast to find the dining room cold, the fire unlit, and no food prepared. Mrs. Henshaw appeared flustered and apologetic. My lady, I'm so sorry. The kitchen staff says they received no orders for breakfast. They're claiming there was confusion about whether you'd be eating in your rooms or… I see. Eliza set down her gloves very carefully. And where is Mrs. Wardlow? In the housekeeper's office, my lady. Eliza walked through the corridors to the small office near the servants' hall. She didn't knock. She simply opened the door and stepped inside. Mrs. Wardlow looked up from her desk, feigning surprise. My lady, I didn't expect… No breakfast was prepared this morning. Oh dear. There must have been some confusion with the… There was no confusion, Mrs. Wardlow. There was deliberate negligence. Eliza closed the door behind her. Let me be very clear about something. I don't play games. If you have a problem with my authority, bring it to me directly. If you want to challenge my position, do it openly. But don't use the household staff as weapons in whatever battle you think you're fighting. The older woman's face hardened. I don't know what you're suggesting. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you exactly what happened. You instructed the kitchen staff to ignore standard routines. You created confusion to demonstrate that things don't function smoothly without your direct oversight. It's a petty power play, and it ends now. Mrs. Wardlow stood, her chair scraping against the floor. You have no right to speak to me this way. I've served this household for 15 years, and I'm Lady Blackmore, which means I have every right. Eliza stepped closer. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go to the kitchen right now and ensure a proper breakfast is prepared. You're going to apologize to Mrs. Henshaw for the inconvenience, and you're going to gather every household account ledger from the past 3 years and have them on my desk by this afternoon. And if I refuse, then I'll have you dismissed before lunch. Lord Blackmore would never… Lord Blackmore has already given me full authority over household operations. He made that clear yesterday. Would you like me to disturb him this morning to confirm it, or would you prefer to simply do as you're told? The standoff lasted 5 heartbeats. Then Mrs. Wardlow's shoulders sagged just slightly. "The ledgers will be ready by 2 o'clock, my lady." "Excellent. And Mrs.
Wardlow? This is the last time we'll have this conversation. If you undermine my authority again, there won't be warnings. There will simply be consequences." Eliza left the office before the woman could respond. Her hands were shaking, adrenaline coursing through her veins, but she kept her stride measured and her expression calm until she reached her own rooms. Only then did she allow herself to collapse into a chair, her heart hammering against her ribs. Mrs. Henshaw appeared moments later. "My lady, what happened? The kitchen is in absolute chaos. Breakfast will be ready in 20 minutes. Eliza forced herself to stand. "In the meantime, I need you to do something for me. I need you to identify which staff members are genuinely loyal to this household and which ones are simply loyal to Mrs. Wardlow. Can you do that?" I think so, yes." "Good. Be discreet and report back to me tonight." The ledgers arrived precisely at 2 o'clock, delivered by a tight-lipped Mrs. Wardlow, who set them on Eliza's desk without a word. Eliza spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing them, her father's training serving her well. Numbers told stories if you knew how to read them, and these numbers told a clear story, systematic skimming, carefully hidden across multiple expense categories. Not enough to be obvious in any single entry, but aggregated over 3 years, it amounted to nearly £1,000. She was still reviewing the evidence when Cassian appeared in her doorway. "Mrs. Wardlow just requested a meeting with me. She seemed agitated." He closed the door. "What did you do?" "I called her bluff." Eliza turned one of the ledgers around so he could see it. "Look at the household supply expenditures for last March. Then compare them to the actual delivery receipts." He studied the pages, his expression darkening. "The numbers don't match." "No, they don't. And it's not just March. It's every month for the past 3 years." She opened another ledger. "She's been inflating costs, pocketing the difference, and using her position to ensure no one questioned it." "How much?" "Nearly £1,000. He closed the ledger very carefully. "I'll have her arrested." "No." Eliza stood. "You'll give her a choice. Resign immediately with a neutral reference, or face prosecution. She's been here 15 years, Cassian. She knows every secret of this household. Making an enemy of her serves no purpose." "She stole from me." "She did. And she'll pay for it by losing her position and any hope of similar employment elsewhere. But if you prosecute her, she'll fight back. She'll spread rumors. She'll make things difficult." Eliza moved around the desk. "Let her leave quietly. It sends the same message to the rest of the staff without the spectacle." He was quiet for a long moment. "You're more ruthless than I expected." "I'm practical. There's still a difference." "Is there?" He studied her face. "You've been here 10 days, and you've already dismantled the existing power structure, uncovered embezzlement, and neutralized the one person who could have made your position untenable. That's not practical, Eliza. That's strategic." "Maybe I'm both." He smiled, that rare, genuine expression that transformed his severe features. "Maybe you are." Mrs. Wardlow left Blackmore Estate the following morning with a hastily packed trunk and a letter of reference that praised her long service while subtly warning any potential employer to examine her too closely. She didn't say goodbye. She simply climbed into the hired carriage and disappeared down the long drive. Eliza watched from the window of her sitting room, feeling no triumph, only tired relief. "My lady," Mrs. Henshaw appeared in the doorway. "The staff is asking who will replace Mrs. Wardlow." "No one. Not immediately." Eliza turned from the window. "I'll oversee operations directly for the next month. That will give me time to understand how things actually function and identify who deserves promotion." Over the following weeks, Eliza transformed Blackmore Estate through sheer force of will. She met with every department head, asked detailed questions, and made careful notes. She discovered that the kitchen was overstaffed but undersupplied, that the laundry operated on an absurdly inefficient schedule, and that 3 of the footmen were being paid for duties they'd stopped performing years ago. She made changes gradually, explaining each decision, inviting input from the staff themselves. The older servants remained suspicious, but the younger ones began to respond, tentatively at first, then with growing enthusiasm. "It's like the house is waking up," Mrs. Henshaw reported one evening. The maids are actually talking to each other again instead of just doing their work in silence. The cook asked if she could try a new menu for next week's dinners. Even Mr. Harrison, the butler, smiled yesterday. Did he? Eliza looked up from the menu she was reviewing. I wasn't aware, mister. Harrison's face could smile. Oh, he can be quite pleasant when he's not terrified of being dismissed for breathing wrong. But the real transformation happened in the kitchen. Eliza had always found peace in cooking, the precise measurements, the careful timing, the alchemy of turning raw ingredients into something nourishing. At Thornfield, she'd often helped in the kitchen when the staff was overwhelmed. Here at Blackmore, the kitchen was a cold industrial operation where the cook followed rigid menus approved years ago by Mrs. Wardlow. One afternoon, Eliza appeared in the kitchen doorway wearing a simple work dress, her hair tied back, her sleeves rolled up. The cook, a formidable woman named Mrs. Brennan, stared at her in shock. My lady, is something wrong with the meals? No, the meals are fine. I was simply wondering if you'd mind if I cooked something. You want to cook? I enjoy it, and I thought perhaps we could try a few new dishes if you're interested. Mrs. Brennan looked around at her staff, 3 kitchen maids who were watching with barely concealed curiosity. I suppose there's no harm in it, my lady. What started as an awkward experiment became a regular occurrence. 3 afternoons a week, Eliza would appear in the kitchen and work alongside the staff. She introduced recipes from her mother's family, dishes from the eastern settlements that the cook had never attempted. She taught the kitchen maids techniques she'd learned from Thornfield's former cook, and slowly the kitchen transformed from a place of rigid routine into something warmer, more alive. You're different down here, Mrs. Brennan observed one afternoon as they worked on a complicated pastry together. Less formal. I'm the same person, just less observed. Eliza crimped the edges of the pastry with practiced precision. In the drawing room, I'm Lady Blackmore. In here, I'm just someone who likes to cook. Lord Blackmore knows you do this? He does? And he approves? Eliza looked up, meeting the cook's eyes. He doesn't object, which, for Lord Blackmore, is essentially the same thing. The truth was more complicated. Cassian had discovered her in the kitchen one evening when he came looking for her before dinner. He'd stood in the doorway, watching in silent astonishment as she laughed with the kitchen maids while kneading bread dough. You cook, he'd said, as though discovering she could fly. I cook. She'd wiped flour from her hands. Is that a problem? No, it's just unexpected. Most things about me seem to be unexpected. He'd smiled at that. Yes, they do. But it was at dinner that night that something shifted between them. The meal featured a dish Eliza had prepared herself. Roasted vegetables with herbs from the estate's neglected garden, prepared in a style her mother had taught her. Cassian took a bite, then stopped, his fork suspended halfway to his plate. What is it? Eliza asked, suddenly uncertain. This is remarkable. He took another bite, then another. You made this? I did, with Mrs. Brennan's help. It's the best thing I've eaten since... He trailed off, something unguarded crossing his face. Since I was a child, my grandmother used to cook something similar. It was the first personal detail he'd ever shared voluntarily. Eliza set down her own fork. Tell me about her. Why? Because you never talk about your family, about who you were before you became Lord Blackmore. He was quiet for a long moment. There's not much to tell. My grandfather was a coal merchant. My grandmother managed his household. They worked hard, saved everything, invested carefully. By the time my father was grown, they'd built a substantial fortune, enough to buy a minor title, enough to give me opportunities they'd never had. And that's what you feel you owe them? Success? I owe them everything. They gave me this life. At what cost? His eyes sharpened. What do you mean? I mean you live in this beautiful house surrounded by beautiful things, and you treat it all like a military installation. You've built exactly the life they wanted for you, but I'm not sure you've built a life you actually want. And what would you know about what I want? Nothing, because you never talk about it. You talk about duty, about obligation, about what's expected, but never about what you actually desire. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with something dangerous. I desired legitimacy, Cassian said finally. I desired respect. I desired to prove that I belonged in the world they let me buy my way into. And I achieved all of those things. Did you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're still fighting the same battles you fought when you first arrived. Still trying to prove yourself to people who will never accept you. Still measuring your worth by their standards instead of your own. And you think you understand me after 3 weeks? No. I think I'm starting to see the parts of yourself you don't let anyone else see, including yourself. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This conversation is over. Cassian, I said it's over. He left. Eliza sat alone in the dining room, her appetite gone, wondering if she'd just destroyed the fragile truce they'd been building. But the next morning, she found a note slipped under her door. The handwriting was precise, controlled, unmistakably his. I apologize for my abruptness last night. You were right, about more than I'm ready to acknowledge. Perhaps we could continue the conversation sometime when I'm less defensive. C. She held the note for a long time, reading and rereading those careful words. Then she tucked it into the drawer of her desk and went down to breakfast. Cassian was already there, reading correspondence with his usual focused intensity. He looked up when she entered. Good morning, he said carefully. Good morning. She took her seat. Thank you for the note. Thank you for what you said last night, even if I didn't react well. You reacted like someone who spent his entire life being judged. I shouldn't have pushed. Yes, you should have. He set down his letters. No one else does. Everyone is too busy either fearing me or trying to use me to actually challenge me. It's refreshing, if uncomfortable. They ate in silence for a moment, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Less wary, more companionable. The Ashford ball is in 2 days, Cassian said eventually. Are you prepared? As prepared as I can be, she set down her teacup. Are you? For the ball, yes. For society's reaction to our marriage? He shrugged. That's less certain. They'll gossip regardless. We might as well give them something worth gossiping about. Which is? A marriage that looks real. That looks like a partnership instead of a transaction. She met his eyes. Can you do that? Can you pretend we're more than just 2 people sharing a house? Can you? I asked first. A smile ghosted across his face. Yes, I can pretend. The question is whether anyone will believe it. They will, Eliza said with more confidence than she felt, because we'll make them believe it. 2 days later, Eliza stood in her dressing room while Mrs. Henshaw fastened the final buttons on a gown that had arrived from the seamstress that morning. Deep emerald silk that brought out her eyes, cut in the latest fashion but with subtle modifications that spoke of personal taste rather than blind adherence to trends. You look beautiful, my lady, Mrs. Henshaw whispered. I look like someone trying very hard to look beautiful. Eliza studied her reflection. There's a difference. No one will see that but you. A knock at the connecting door. Eliza, are you ready? She opened it to find Cassian in formal evening wear, his dark hair precisely arranged, his expression neutral, but his eyes widened slightly when he saw her. You look... He stopped, searching for words. You look exactly right. So do you. She took the wrap Mrs. Henshaw offered. Shall we? The carriage ride to Ashford Manor took 40 minutes. They spent it in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. As they approached the manor, ablaze with lights, carriages lined up along the drive, Cassian reached across the space between them. Whatever happens tonight, he said quietly, we face it together. Agreed? Eliza took his offered hand. Agreed? They stepped out of the carriage into a world of music and laughter and barely concealed curiosity. Every head turned as they entered the ballroom. Conversation stuttered to a halt, then resumed twice as loud. Lady Ashford approached, her smile sharp as knives. Lord Blackmore, and this must be your bride. How unexpected. Lady Ashford. Cassian's voice was perfectly polite. May I present my wife, Eliza, Lady Blackmore? Eliza curtsied with precise grace. Lady Ashford, thank you for including us this evening. Well, one can hardly exclude the territory's most talked-about couple.
Her eyes were cold despite the smile.
Tell me, Lady Blackmore, how are you finding married life? Illuminating, Eliza replied smoothly. Lord Blackmore is full of surprises. I'm sure he is. Lady Ashford's gaze swept over her, assessing, judging. Do enjoy the evening. I'm certain everyone is simply dying to make your acquaintance. She glided away. Cassian's hand tightened on Eliza's arm. That went better than expected. Did it? I felt like I was being measured for a coffin. Welcome to Territorial Society. The rest of the evening was a careful performance. They danced when expected, conversed when required, and presented a united front against the whispers and speculation. Eliza watched Cassian navigate the social landscape with the same cold precision he brought to everything else, calculating, controlled, giving nothing away. But she also saw the moments when the mask slipped, the way his jaw tightened when Lord Ashford made a casual comment about new money, the flicker of anger when Mrs. Ashford's sister mentioned Eliza's father's debts with false sympathy, the careful blankness when old schoolmates of Cassian's pretended not to remember him. During their second dance, Eliza leaned closer. You don't have to endure this alone anymore. He looked down at her, surprise evident. What? These people. Their casual cruelty. You've been facing it alone for years, but you're not alone now. When they mock you, they mock me too. We're in this together. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the armor she'd been trying to reach for weeks. Thank you, he said quietly. Don't thank me. Just remember it. The ballroom had grown stifling. During a break between dances, Eliza slipped outside onto the terrace, desperate for fresh air. She didn't realize Cassian had followed until she heard his voice behind her. Are you all right? Just needed a moment. She turned to face him. Is it always like this? The constant judgment? The endless performance? Always. He joined her at the balustrade. But you're handling it better than most. I'm terrified I'll say the wrong thing and destroy everything you've built. Eliza. He turned her to face him. You couldn't destroy what I've built if you tried. These people made up their minds about me years ago. Nothing you say or do will change that. Then why do you keep trying? Because... He stopped, the words clearly difficult. Because I made a promise. To my grandparents, to myself. That I would succeed. That I would make their sacrifices mean something. At the cost of your own happiness? Happiness is a luxury. Success is necessary. They're not mutually exclusive, Cassian. He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. Aren't they? Before she could answer, the sound of approaching footsteps made them both turn. Lord Marcus Ashford, Lady Ashford's eldest son, appeared in the doorway, his face flushed with wine. Well, well, the happy couple, stealing a moment alone. His smile was unpleasant. Tell me, Blackmore, how much did you have to pay her to get a Thornfield to marry so far beneath her station? Cassian went very still. Watch yourself, Ashford. Oh, come now. Everyone knows it was a business arrangement. The desperate daughter of a failed businessman and the social climber who bought his way into the peerage. It's positively mercenary. Lord Ashford, Eliza's voice cut through the tension like ice. You're drunk. Go inside before you embarrass yourself further. Embarrass myself? You're not the one whose father gambled away the family fortune 3 years ago and had to beg Lord Blackmore for a loan to save face, Eliza continued, her voice deadly calm. You're not the one whose mother still owes my husband £40,000. And you're certainly not the one whose sister's dowry was financed entirely by Lord Blackmore's generosity. So before you lecture me about mercenary marriages, perhaps consider your own family's dependence on the man you're currently insulting. Ashford's face went from red to white. How dare you? How dare I speak the truth? How dare I defend my husband against a drunk bully? Or how dare I exist in your social circle despite not being born into it? She stepped closer. I'm Lady Blackmore now, which means I have every right to be here. The question is, do you? He fled. Actually turned and fled back into the ballroom like a scolded child. Eliza stood there, her heart racing, hardly believing what she'd just done. Cassian was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. How did you know about the Ashford debts? I've been reviewing your financial records, along with the household accounts. She turned to him. Did I overstep?
Overstep? He laughed, a genuine, surprised sound. Eliza, you just did what I've wanted to do for 5 years but couldn't without causing a scandal. You defended me. You defended us. And you did it using information I didn't even realize you had access to. Are you angry? He shook his head. I'm amazed, and perhaps a little frightened. Of me? Of how quickly you've become essential. The words hung between them, weighted with implications neither was ready to address. Inside, the music swelled. The party continued. But out on the terrace, in the cold December air, something fundamental had shifted between them. Eliza had stopped being just a convenient wife, and Cassian had stopped being just a means to survival. What they were becoming instead, neither could say. But as they returned to the ballroom together, hands linked, shoulders straight, presenting a united front against a world that wanted to break them apart, they both knew the performance had become something else entirely, something real, something dangerous, something neither of them knew how to stop. The carriage ride home was silent, but the quality of silence had changed. Cassian sat across from her, his expression unreadable in the dim light, but his eyes never left her face. Eliza could feel the weight of his gaze, the unspoken questions hanging between them like smoke. You shouldn't have done that, he said finally, his voice low. Defended you, or exposed the Ashfords' hypocrisy? Either. Both. He leaned forward slightly. You made powerful enemies tonight, Eliza. The Ashfords won't forgive that humiliation. They made enemies of themselves the moment Marcus decided to insult us publicly. She met his gaze steadily. Or would you have preferred I stood there silently while he mocked our marriage? No, He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. I'm not accustomed to anyone defending me. Then get accustomed to it. We made a bargain, Cassian. You gave me protection. I give you legitimacy. That includes protecting your reputation as fiercely as you protect mine. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. You mean that? I always mean what I say. I thought you'd learned that by now. The corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but close. I'm beginning to. When they arrived at Blackmore Estate, he helped her from the carriage with a hand that lingered a moment longer than necessary. The night air was bitter cold, frost already forming on the ground, their breath visible in the lamplight. Thank you, he said quietly. For tonight. For all of it. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. His hand was still on hers. Eliza, But whatever he'd been about to say was interrupted by the appearance of Harrison, the butler, his face grave. My lord, a message arrived while you were out. It's marked urgent. Cassian took the sealed letter, his expression darkening as he read. When did this arrive? 2 hours ago, my lord. The messenger said it came from Whitmore Abbey. Whitmore? Eliza watched Cassian's face go pale. What is it? He handed her the letter without a word. The handwriting was shaky, clearly written in distress. Lord Blackmore, your great-uncle Edmund has taken gravely ill. The physicians say he has days at most. He is asking for you. Please come with all haste. Father Whitmore. Your great-uncle, Eliza said softly. You've never mentioned him. We were estranged, for years. Cassian's voice was tight. He raised me after my parents died. Then we disagreed about certain decisions I made. We haven't spoken in nearly a decade. And now he's dying. Yes. He took the letter back, folding it with mechanical precision. Whitmore Abbey is 3 days' journey north, in the hill country. The roads will be difficult this time of year, possibly impassable if the weather turns. Then we should leave at first light. He looked at her sharply. We? You don't think I'm letting you make that journey alone, do you? Eliza, you don't understand. Whitmore Abbey is not Blackmore Estate. It's isolated, primitive. The conditions are harsh even in good weather, and my uncle, he hesitated. He's not an easy man. He'll likely disapprove of you as much as he disapproved of everything else I've done. I don't care if he disapproves. You're going to see a dying relative in the middle of winter. You're not doing that alone. She touched his arm lightly. Besides, didn't we just agree we face things together? Something shifted in his expression, the armor cracking just slightly. You're serious? Always. Then we leave at dawn. Pack only what you need. It won't be comfortable.
Dawn came cold and gray, the sky threatening snow. Eliza dressed in her warmest traveling clothes while Mrs. Henshaw fussed over her.
My lady, are you certain about this? 3 days on winter roads to visit a dying man who may not even want to see you? I'm certain. Eliza fastened her cloak. Lord Blackmore needs support, whether he admits it or not, and I won't let him face this alone.
The journey north was exactly as brutal as Cassian had warned. The roads grew worse with each mile, transitioning from maintained thoroughfares to rough tracks carved through increasingly wild terrain. The landscape changed too. The cultivated fields and gentle hills giving way to dense forests and rocky outcroppings. They traveled with minimal staff, just Harrison driving the carriage and 1 footman. No ladies' maids, no personal attendants. Eliza had insisted Mrs. Henshaw remain at Blackmore to maintain the household in their absence. The first day passed in relative silence. Cassian sat across from her, staring out the window at the passing landscape, his expression distant. Several times Eliza tried to engage him in conversation, but his responses were clipped, distracted. That night they stopped at a small inn, barely more than a cottage with rooms to let. The accommodations were rough, 2 small rooms with thin walls, lumpy beds, and a dining area that smelled of old grease and desperation.
This is the best lodging for 50 miles, Cassian said, his voice apologetic. I'm sorry it's not... It's fine. Eliza removed her traveling cloak. I've survived worse. Have you? He was studying her again with that penetrating gaze. I sometimes forget you spent weeks preparing for a future that involved governessing or worse. This must seem familiar. Humbling, perhaps. Not familiar. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed. Cassian, talk to me about your uncle. About why you're so tense. He was quiet for a long moment, standing at the window overlooking the darkened courtyard. Edmund Blackmore raised me from age 7, after my parents died in a fire. He is the most rigid, uncompromising man I've ever known. He believed in discipline, in self-denial, in earning everything through suffering and sacrifice. He sounds harsh. He was necessary. He took a grief-stricken child and turned him into someone who could survive in a world that wanted to destroy him for his origins. Cassian's reflection in the window was shadowed, haunted. Everything I am, everything I've achieved, it's because of what he taught me. And why did you become estranged? Because he wanted me to remain pure in my poverty, to prove my worth through suffering rather than success. His voice went hard. When I bought my title, when I established myself in society, he saw it as betrayal, as selling out everything he'd taught me about integrity and self-reliance. We had a final argument. He told me I'd become exactly what he'd tried to save me from, a man who measured his worth by others' standards. I told him he was a bitter old man who'd rather watch me fail nobly than succeed imperfectly. And then I left. That was 9 years ago. Eliza crossed to him, standing close enough to see his reflection clearly. And now he's dying, and you're wondering if he was right. Aren't you? He turned to face her. You stood on that terrace tonight and told me I measure my success by people who will never accept me. You've been saying it in different ways since we married. Maybe Edmund was right. Maybe I did sell everything that mattered for social acceptance that's fundamentally hollow. Or maybe, Eliza said carefully, he taught you to survive but not to live. Maybe he gave you strength, but also taught you that showing any need, any vulnerability, any desire for more than mere existence was weakness. She held his gaze. Has it occurred to you that you can be grateful for what he gave you, while also recognizing the damage he did? What damage? The belief that you have to earn everything, that nothing is freely given, that accepting help or showing emotion is failure. She reached up, touching his face gently. Cassian, you're the most controlled person I've ever met. You treat every interaction like a negotiation, every relationship like a transaction. Even our marriage, even this journey, you frame in terms of duty and obligation rather than what? Rather than acknowledging that maybe you're doing this because you need to. Because despite everything, you still care what your uncle thinks of you.
Because you want his approval even after all these years. His jaw tightened under her hand. You think you know me so well after 6 weeks? I think I see what you won't let yourself see. And I think facing your uncle terrifies you more than anything the Ashfords could ever do. For a moment she thought he'd pull away, retreat behind his usual walls. Instead, he caught her hand, pressing it more firmly against his face. Yes, he said quietly. It terrifies me. Because if he dies still believing I failed him, still thinking I betrayed everything he taught me, then maybe he's right. Maybe I did become something unworthy. You're not unworthy. You're human. There's a difference. He kissed her palm then, a sudden, desperate gesture that caught them both by surprise. For a heartbeat they stood frozen, the contact electric, dangerous. Then Cassian stepped back, releasing her hand as though it burned. I should let you rest. Tomorrow will be another long day. He fled to his own room before she could respond. Eliza stood alone in the dim chamber, her palms still tingling from his kiss, her heart racing. Something had shifted between them on that terrace at the ball. And now, stripped of the familiar trappings of their lives, forced into proximity and vulnerability, whatever walls they'd maintained were crumbling fast. The second day's journey was worse. Snow began falling in the afternoon. Light at first, then heavier. The roads became treacherous. Twice the carriage nearly slid into ditches. By evening, they were forced to stop at an even more primitive inn, barely more than a farmer's cottage that occasionally housed travelers. Only one room available, the innkeeper said apologetically, but it's got a good fire and a decent bed, better than nothing in this weather. Cassian looked at Eliza. I can sleep in the carriage. Don't be ridiculous, we'll manage. The room was small but clean, dominated by a single bed that was clearly meant for one person, perhaps two if they were very close. A fire crackled in the hearth. A basin of water sat on a crude washstand. I'll take the floor, Cassian said immediately. You'll do no such thing. You're already exhausted from 2 days of travel, and you're dreading tomorrow. You need actual rest. Eliza removed her cloak. We're both adults. We can share a bed without the world ending. Eliza, it's decided. Now go wash up while I change. He left, giving her privacy. When he returned, she was already under the blankets, dressed in her nightgown, her back to the door. He stood there for a long moment, then carefully, quietly, climbed into the other side of the bed. The space between them felt charged, electric. Eliza could feel the heat of him, the careful way he held himself rigid to avoid any accidental contact. This is absurd, she said finally. We're lying here like 2 planks of wood afraid to touch. I'm trying to be respectful. You're trying to maintain distance. There's a difference. She rolled over to face him. In the firelight, his face was all sharp angles and shadows. Cassian, I'm not fragile. I won't shatter if you accidentally brush against me in your sleep. It's not that. Then what is it? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I'm afraid if I let myself get too close to you, I won't remember this is supposed to be temporary. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Who says it's supposed to be temporary? Eliza asked softly. Our contract did. 1 year, then you're free to leave. And if I don't want to be free? If I want... She stopped, the words too dangerous to speak. Want what? This. Us. Whatever we're becoming. He reached across the small space, his fingers finding hers in the darkness. Eliza, you don't know what you're saying. You married me to survive. You didn't choose this freely. I chose you at the ball. I chose to defend you, to stand with you, to come on this journey. Those were free choices, Cassian, made with full knowledge of who you are and what this means. You barely know who I am. I know you're brilliant and ruthless and terrified of needing anyone. I know you measure yourself against impossible standards and never forgive yourself for falling short. I know you think love is weakness and vulnerability is failure. She squeezed his hand. And I know that despite all of that, you're the most genuine person I've met in this entire territory. Because at least you're honest about your calculations. You don't pretend to be something you're not. Is that supposed to be a compliment? It's the truth, which I think you value more than compliments. He pulled her closer, not all the way into his arms, but near enough that she could feel his breath on her face. "What are we doing, Eliza?" "I don't know, but I'm tired of pretending this is just a business arrangement." "So am I." He kissed her then, properly this time. Not the desperate gesture from the previous night, but something deeper, more deliberate. Eliza responded without hesitation, her hands finding the hard planes of his back, his shoulders. The kiss deepened, became urgent, years of control and careful distance burning away in the space of heartbeats. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cassian pressed his forehead against hers. "This complicates everything," he said. "I know. We should stop before this goes further, before we can't go back." "I know that too." Neither of them moved away. "Tomorrow I have to face Edmund," Cassian said quietly. "I have to walk into that house and confront everything I've been running from, everything I've tried to prove wrong, and I don't know if I'm strong enough." "Then lean on me. That's what partners do." "Is that what we are? Partners?" "I think we've been partners since the moment I signed your contract. We just weren't ready to admit it." He kissed her again, softer this time, almost tender. Then he gathered her close, tucking her head under his chin, holding her like something precious he was afraid to break. They slept that way, tangled together, barriers finally broken, pretenses abandoned. The third day dawned cold and brilliant, the world transformed by snow. The final leg of the journey took them deep into the hill country, where civilization gave way to wilderness. Whitmore Abbey appeared in the distance like something from a dark fairy tale, a stone fortress clinging to the side of a mountain, austere and forbidding. "That's where you grew up?" Eliza asked, staring at the grim structure. "From age 7 to 18, yes." Cassian's voice was tight. "It looks exactly the same." They were greeted at the gate by an elderly priest, Father Whitmore, presumably, who looked relieved to see them. "Lord Blackmore, thank heavens you've come. Edmund has been asking for you constantly." His eyes went to Eliza. "And this must be my wife, Lady Blackmore." The priest's eyebrows rose, but he said nothing, simply gesturing for them to follow. "He's in his old chambers. The physicians have done what they can, but—" He shook his head. "He's failing fast. Hours, perhaps. A day at most." The interior of the abbey was as harsh as its exterior. Stone walls, narrow windows, minimal decoration. It felt more like a prison than a home. As they climbed the stairs to the upper chambers, Eliza felt Cassian tense beside her. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "Yes, I do." Edmund Blackmore lay in a narrow bed in a sparse room that looked like a monk's cell. He was ancient, skeletal, his breathing labored and wet. But his eyes, when they opened and fixed on Cassian, were still sharp as razors. "So," he rasped, "you came. You called." Cassian moved closer to the bed, his posture rigid. "Uncle Edmund." "Don't Uncle Edmund me, boy. You've ignored me for 9 years. Don't pretend affection now that I'm dying." The old man's gaze shifted to Eliza. "And who's this? Another of your society acquisitions?" "My wife, Eliza, Lady Blackmore." Edmund laughed, a horrible rattling sound. "A wife? Of course. I suppose she comes with an impressive pedigree and absolutely no sense?" "She comes with more sense than either of us," Cassian said quietly, "and more courage." "Courage to marry you for your money, you mean?" Eliza stepped forward before Cassian could respond. "Actually, I married him because I was desperate and he offered me survival. But I stayed because underneath all that calculated control, he's a better man than he believes himself to be, which is more than I can say for most people I've met." Silence fell. Edmund stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, incredibly, he smiled. "Ah, so you married someone with a spine. Perhaps you're not as lost as I thought." "I'm exactly as lost as you always said I was," Cassian replied, his voice carefully neutral. "I sold my integrity for social acceptance. I compromised everything you taught me. I became the very thing you warned against. You were right, Uncle. About all of it." "Was I?" Edmund's breathing grew more labored. "Boy, come closer. I don't have much time, and there are things you need to know." Cassian knelt beside the bed. Eliza started to step back to give them privacy, but Edmund's hand shot out with surprising strength. "Stay, girl. You should hear this too. She moved closer. Edmund looked between them, his eyes calculating even in his dying state. I was wrong, he said finally. About you, Cassian. About what I tried to make you. Cassian went very still. What? I tried to turn you into a weapon of pure will. No weakness, no compromise, no mercy. I thought that's what you'd need to survive in a world that would despise you for your origins. He coughed, a terrible sound. But all I did was teach you to despise yourself, to measure your worth by impossible standards, to see any human need as failure. You gave me strength. I gave you rigidity. I taught you survival but not living. Your wife is right. I can see it in her eyes. She sees what I made you into. He gripped Cassian's hand. I called you here to tell you that everything I taught you about power and control was a lie. Real strength isn't never bending, boy. It's knowing when to bend so you don't break. I don't understand. You think I disapproved of your success? Your title? Your wealth? Edmund shook his head. I was jealous, furious that you'd achieved everything I dreamed of and then rejected it all myself out of pride and bitterness. I drove you away because seeing you succeed reminded me of my own failures. Cassian's face had gone pale. That's not... You said I'd betrayed... I lied. To hurt you. To punish you for being braver than I ever was. Edmund's breathing grew more ragged. There's something else. Something I should have told you years ago. What? Your parents. The fire that killed them. It wasn't an accident. The room went silent, except for Edmund's labored breathing. What are you saying? Cassian's voice was barely a whisper. It was set deliberately, by a consortium of merchants who opposed your father's business expansion. They wanted to destroy him, to take his holdings. The fire was meant to kill the whole family. You only survived because you were visiting me that week. Edmund coughed again. I knew. I found out 6 months after it happened, and I said nothing. Because I wanted you to stay with me. Because if you'd known, you would have sought justice, sought revenge, and it would have destroyed you. Eliza watched Cassian's face go from pale to ashen. You let them get away with murdering my parents. They're all dead now. Died years ago, most of them. But yes, I let them escape justice because I was selfish, because I wanted to keep you. Edmund's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, boy. I've been sorry for 30 years, but I was too proud, too stubborn to tell you. Who were they? Cassian's voice was dangerously quiet. Give me names. Edmund rattled off 6 names, men Eliza recognized from her father's business dealings, from society functions, from the networks of power that controlled the territories. All dead, as Edmund said. But their families remained. Their sons held positions of influence, including Marcus Ashford's father. The Ashfords, Cassian breathed. Richard Ashford was part of the consortium. He financed it, arranged the logistics. He wanted your father's shipping contracts. Edmund's breathing was failing fast. I'm sorry. I should have told you. Should have let you decide. But I was afraid of losing you, and in trying to keep you, I drove you away anyway. He coughed violently, blood flecking his lips. Father Whitmore stepped forward. My lord, we should let him rest. No. Edmund gripped Cassian's hand tighter. One more thing. The estate. Whitmore Abbey and all its holdings. I'm leaving it to you, to both of you. His eyes went to Eliza. Take care of him, girl. Teach him what I couldn't. Teach him to be human. I will, Eliza said, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. Edmund smiled. Good. That's good. His breathing changed then, becoming shallow and rapid. Father Whitmore began murmuring prayers. Cassian knelt beside the bed, holding his uncle's hand, his face a mask of controlled anguish. Edmund Blackmore died 10 minutes later, with Cassian beside him and Eliza's hand on his nephew's shoulder. The silence that followed was absolute. Finally, Cassian stood. His movements were mechanical, controlled, his face carefully blank. I need to see to the arrangements. Cassian, please, just give me a moment. He walked out of the room, his spine rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. Father Whitmore looked at Eliza sadly. He won't let himself grieve. Edmund taught him that too well. Then I'll have to teach him differently. Eliza followed Cassian out. She found him in the chapel, standing before the altar, his back to her. He didn't turn when she entered. "The Ashfords," he said quietly. "They killed my parents. And I've been bowing to them, accepting their patronization, letting them mock me at their balls and dinners. Because I didn't know." "You couldn't have known." "Edmund knew. For 30 years he knew, and he said nothing." Cassian's voice cracked slightly. "He let me walk into that world blind. Let me make alliances with the sons of the men who murdered my family. He was trying to protect you. He was protecting himself." Cassian spun to face her, and for the first time since she'd met him, his control shattered. "He kept me here, isolated because he needed me to need him. He taught me to be strong so I'd never leave. And when I did leave, when I built something of my own, he punished me for it. And now he's dead, and I can't even hate him properly because he spent his last breath apologizing." He slammed his fist into the stone wall, hard enough that Eliza heard bones crack. Blood bloomed on his knuckles. "Cassian, stop. I don't know how to feel." The words were torn from him. "I don't know if I should mourn him or hate him or thank him. He gave me everything and took everything, and I don't know which way's heavier." Eliza crossed to him, taking his bleeding hand in both of hers. "Then feel all of it. Feel everything. You don't have to choose." "I don't know how to feel everything. He taught me to feel nothing." "Then I'll teach you." She pressed his hand against her heart. "You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to grieve. You're allowed to be confused and hurt and furious all at once. That's what being human means, Cassian. That's what he stole from you." He stared at her, something breaking behind his eyes. Then finally, the dam burst. He pulled her against him and wept, great wrenching sobs that shook his entire frame. Eliza held him, let him break, let years of suppressed grief and rage and pain pour out in the cold silence of the chapel. When the storm finally passed, he remained in her arms, exhausted. "I'm sorry," he said hoarsely. "Don't apologize for being human. I don't know how to do this, how to be this, how to let someone see me like this." "You learn, starting now." She pulled back enough to look at his face. "We're going to bury your uncle. We're going to settle his affairs. We're going to return to Blackmore Estate. And then we're going to decide what to do about the Ashfords." "What to do?" He laughed bitterly. "What can I do? Richard Ashford is dead. I can't touch him. But his son isn't. His family isn't. Their position isn't." Her eyes glinted dangerously. "They built their empire on murder and lies, on your family's destruction. And they've spent years looking down on you, mocking you, treating you as beneath them. I think it's time we reminded them exactly who they're dealing with." He studied her face. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we stop playing by their rules. Stop accepting their version of society. Stop pretending we need their approval." She touched his face gently. "You said Edmund taught you to survive. Well, I'm teaching you to win. And how do we do that? We expose them. Every debt, every indiscretion, every dirty secret. We use everything you know about their finances, everything I can uncover about their past, and we destroy them so thoroughly that no one will ever look down on a Blackmore again. That's dangerous. They'll fight back. Let them. We're stronger together than they are divided." She smiled, sharp and cold. "Besides, you're not the desperate social climber anymore. You're Lord Blackmore, with a Thornfield wife and an ancient abbey to your name. You're exactly what they pretended to be, and that terrifies them." He kissed her then, fierce and desperate, and full of something that felt dangerously like hope. When they finally broke apart, his eyes were clear, focused. "All right," he said, "we fight. Together." "Together," Eliza agreed. They stood in the chapel, hands linked, facing an uncertain future. Edmund Blackmore's body lay cooling in the chamber above. Outside, snow fell on the ancient stones of Whitmore Abbey. And in the territories below, the Ashfords and their allies had no idea that the world they'd built on lies and murder was about to come crashing down around them, because Eliza and Cassian Blackmore were done surviving. They were ready to burn it all down. They were ready to burn it all down. The return journey to Blackmore Estate took 4 days instead of 3. The roads had worsened with fresh snow, and they'd stopped to settle Edmund's affairs and arrange for the Abbey's steward to maintain operations until they could return. But the delay gave them something more valuable than speed: time to plan. In cramped-in rooms and during long hours in the carriage, Eliza and Cassian mapped out their strategy with the precision of generals preparing for war. "The Ashfords are the keystone," Cassian said, spreading documents across the narrow table in their latest accommodation. "Richard Ashford organized the consortium that killed my parents. His son Marcus is the current family head. If we destroy their credibility, the rest of the old families will fracture." "What do we have on them?" Eliza studied the papers, financial records, correspondence, business agreements that Cassian had accumulated over years of careful documentation. "Debt. Mountains of it. The estate is mortgaged to the hilt. The mother's gambling habits. Marcus's investments in a failed mining venture that he covered up by borrowing from his sister's trust fund." Cassian's finger traced a line of numbers. "They're one scandal away from complete ruin. They've been holding on through social positioning and strategic marriages, like his sister's engagement to Lord Pemberton." "Exactly. Pemberton is wealthy but desperate for social acceptance. The Ashfords are trading their name for his money to stay afloat." Eliza leaned back, thinking. "So we need to do two things: expose their financial instability and undermine their social position simultaneously. Make them toxic as allies. And how do we do that without appearing vindictive? If we attack them openly, we look petty. We don't attack them openly. We let the truth attack them." She pulled one of the ledgers closer. "You said you hold mortgages on half the estates in the territory. Do you hold the Ashford mortgage?" "No, that's held by the Merchants' Bank of Millbrook." "Who owns controlling interest in that bank?" Cassian's eyes narrowed. "I do." "Then you effectively hold their mortgage, which means you can call it due. Demand immediate payment." "That would destroy them, but it would also make me look ruthless. Unless you had a legitimate business reason." Eliza's mind was racing now, pieces clicking together. What if the bank was conducting routine audits of all outstanding loans, standard business practice? And what if, during that audit, certain irregularities were discovered? Misrepresentations on the original loan application, undisclosed debts, fraudulent collateral valuations. "You think they committed fraud to secure the loan?" "I think powerful families always commit fraud. The question is whether anyone bothers to look." She met his eyes. "Let me examine their loan documents. Give me 3 days with your bank records. I'll find something." "Eliza, this is dangerous. If the Ashfords discover what we're doing, how will they discover it? I'm Lady Blackmore reviewing my husband's business interests. That's expected behavior for a wife concerned about household finances." She smiled coldly. "Besides, they already hate me. What's a little more animosity?" He reached across the table, taking her hand. "When did you become so calculating?" "I learned from the best." She squeezed his fingers. "Cassian, these people killed your parents. They've spent decades profiting from that murder. They mocked you, looked down on you, treated you as beneath them, all while standing on a foundation built from your family's ashes. We're not being vindictive. We're seeking justice." "Justice or revenge? Does it matter?" He was quiet for a moment, then shook his head slowly. "No, I suppose it doesn't." They arrived at Blackmore Estate on a gray afternoon to find the household in perfect order. Mrs. Henshaw met them at the entrance, relief evident on her face. "My lady, my lord, welcome home. I trust the journey was—" She trailed off, seeing their expressions. "Forgive me, I heard about Lord Edmund's passing. My condolences." "Thank you, Mrs. Henshaw." Cassian's voice was carefully neutral. "Please have my study prepared. Lady Blackmore and I will be working there this evening." "Of course, my lord." As they climbed the stairs to change from traveling clothes, Eliza caught Cassian's arm. "We need to be careful here. The servants will gossip. If word reaches the wrong ears that we're investigating the Ashfords, the staff is loyal. The staff is human, and humans talk." She paused outside her chamber. "We work in complete secrecy. Only Harrison and Mrs. Henshaw know we're reviewing business documents. Everyone else believes we're simply catching up on estate management after the journey." "You really have thought of everything." "I'm trying to, because once we start this, Cassian, we can't stop halfway. We either destroy them completely, or we make enemies who will spend the rest of their lives trying to destroy us." His expression hardened. "Then we destroy them completely." The next 3 days passed in a blur of financial documents and careful calculation. Eliza installed herself in Cassian's study, surrounded by ledgers and loan agreements and correspondence. She worked with the focused intensity of someone who understood that the smallest detail might be the key to everything. Mrs. Henshaw brought meals on trays. Harrison ensured they weren't disturbed. And slowly, painstakingly, Eliza built a case that would shatter the Ashford family's carefully constructed facade. "Here," she said on the third evening, spreading papers across Cassian's desk. "The original loan application from 1809. The Ashfords claimed the estate was worth £50,000, with no outstanding debts. Based that valuation on an appraisal conducted by..." She checked her notes. "Whitfield and Associates." "I know Whitfield. He's reputable." "He was reputable. He died in 1812. But look at this." She pulled out another document. "A second appraisal conducted in 1815 by an independent assessor you commissioned for insurance purposes. It valued the Ashford estate at £32,000 and noted existing debts of nearly £8,000 that weren't disclosed in the original application." Cassian studied the documents, his expression darkening. "They committed fraud to secure the loan. Fraud that's well documented and provable, which means you have grounds to call the loan due immediately and demand full repayment within 30 days. They can't possibly repay it. They barely make the interest payments." "Exactly, which means the estate goes into receivership. The bank, your bank, seizes it. The Ashfords are ruined. And they'll know I orchestrated it. They'll suspect, but they can't prove it. It's a legitimate business decision based on documented fraud. If they protest too loudly, it only draws more attention to their dishonesty." Eliza leaned back in her chair. "But that's only half the strategy. We need to undermine their social position simultaneously." "How?" She smiled. "We host a ball. Here at Blackmore Estate. We invite everyone who matters in territorial society. We make it the event of the season, something so spectacular, so impressive, that declining would be a social suicide." "The Ashfords won't come." "Yes, they will, because we'll position it as a memorial celebration for your Uncle Edmund, a gathering to honor his legacy and introduce you as the new Lord of Whitmore Abbey. Declining would be seen as disrespectful to the dead." Cassian was beginning to smile. "And at this ball, we announce the bank's decision to audit all outstanding loans. We frame it as standard business practice. Nothing personal, just prudent management. The Ashfords will realize what's happening, but they'll be surrounded by everyone they need to impress. They'll have to maintain composure while their world collapses around them." "That's brilliant and cruel." "It's effective. There's a difference." She stood, moving around the desk to stand beside him. "Cassian, I need to know you're certain about this. Once we send those invitations, once we start the audit, there's no going back." He looked up at her, his dark eyes clear and focused. "I've never been more certain of anything, except perhaps marrying you." Was that a compliment? It was the truth, which you value more than compliments. He pulled her into his lap, his arms wrapping around her waist. "You've turned my life upside down, Eliza Blackmore. When I married you, I thought I was buying social legitimacy. Instead, I got a partner who's smarter than I am, braver than I deserve, and apparently willing to help me wage war on the territorial elite. Don't sell yourself short. You're the one who spent years accumulating evidence and building leverage. I'm just helping you use it effectively." "You're doing far more than that." He kissed her softly. "You're teaching me that I don't have to face everything alone. That strength comes from partnership, not isolation. Edmund was wrong about a lot of things, but he was right about one. I need to teach you to be human, starting with accepting that you can want things, need things, love things." She touched his face gently. "Can you do that?" "I'm learning." He kissed her again, deeper this time. "With an excellent teacher." Well, the invitations went out the following week, written in Eliza's elegant hand on heavy cream paper. "Lord and Lady Blackmore request the honor of your presence at Blackmore Estate for a memorial celebration honoring the late Edmund Blackmore, and to mark Lord Blackmore's inheritance of Whitmore Abbey. December 28th, 7 o'clock. Formal attire. The responses came back swiftly. Acceptances from nearly every major family in the territory, including, after a telling delay, the Ashfords. They took 3 days to respond. Mrs. Henshaw reported, sorting through the mail.
And the acceptance was written in Lady Ashford's hand, not Marcus's. That's unusual. They're debating whether to come, Eliza said. Marcus wants to refuse. His mother knows they can't afford to. How can you possibly know that? Because I know desperate people, and the Ashfords are very, very desperate. The preparations for the ball consumed the household.
Eliza threw herself into the planning with fierce determination, transforming Blackmore Estate from its usual austere functionality into something spectacular. She worked with Mrs. Brennan to design a menu that would rival anything served at the finest houses. She brought in musicians from the city. She had the ballroom completely redecorated, not with expensive ostentation, but with elegant simplicity that spoke of confidence rather than compensation.
You're making a statement, Cassian observed one evening, watching as she directed the placement of flowers.
I'm making several statements. That we're established, that we're confident, that we don't need their approval, but we're generous enough to include them anyway. She stepped back, evaluating the arrangement. Every detail sends a message, Cassian. The food, the music, the decorations, it all says that we belong here. That we're not desperate social climbers, but people who have chosen to engage with their world on our terms. And what message does hosting a ball send while simultaneously destroying the Ashfords? That we can be gracious and ruthless simultaneously. That we play the game better than they do. She turned to face him. We're not breaking their rules, Cassian. We're proving we mastered them and then chose to write our own. The night of the ball, Eliza dressed with care in a gown of deep sapphire silk that made her eyes luminous. Mrs. Henshaw arranged her hair in an elaborate style that managed to be both fashionable and uniquely her own, not copying society's trends, but setting her own. When she descended the stairs to meet Cassian, his reaction was worth every hour of preparation. He simply stared, words failing him. Is it too much? She asked, suddenly uncertain. It's perfect. You're perfect. He offered his arm. Shall we receive our guests, Lady Blackmore? We shall, Lord Blackmore. They stood at the entrance to the ballroom as their guests arrived, presenting a united front. Eliza greeted each arrival with warm courtesy, using everything she'd learned about society's intricate hierarchies to make each person feel both welcomed and subtly assessed. The Ashfords arrived late, a deliberate slight that Eliza turned to their advantage. Lord Ashford, Lady Ashford, Marcus. She curtsied with perfect grace. How kind of you to come. I know the roads must have been difficult. Lady Ashford's smile was brittle. We wouldn't miss honoring Lord Edmund's memory. He was a formidable man. He was indeed. Cassian inherited not just his estate, but his approach to business. Thorough, uncompromising, fair, but firm. She let the words hang for a moment. Do go in. The champagne is excellent. She watched them enter the ballroom, saw the moment they registered the opulence, the crowd, the success of the event. Saw Marcus's face tighten with barely concealed fury. That was pointed, Cassian murmured. That was necessary. Let them spend the evening watching everyone else enjoy themselves in our home, celebrating our success. Let them feel what it's like to be on the outside looking in. The ball proceeded with careful choreography. Eliza had planned every moment, the timing of the dinner, the selection of dances, even the order in which certain conversations would happen. She moved through the crowd like a general directing troops, subtle and effective. At 9 o'clock after dinner, Cassian stood to make an announcement. The room fell silent. Thank you all for coming tonight. Your presence honors my uncle's memory and marks an important transition for our family. He paused, his gaze sweeping the assembled crowd. Edmund Blackmore taught me many things, but perhaps the most important was the value of integrity in business, of thoroughness, of ensuring that all dealings are honest and transparent. Eliza watched the Ashfords from across the room. Marcus had gone very still. With that in mind, Cassian continued, I'm announcing that the Merchants Bank of Millbrook will be conducting comprehensive audits of all outstanding loans, beginning in the new year. This is standard practice to ensure the bank's continued stability and to verify that all loan agreements are based on accurate information. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Several families shifted uncomfortably. Clearly, others had reasons to fear scrutiny of their finances. I want to assure you all that this is purely a business matter.
Any discrepancies discovered will be addressed through proper channels. We believe in fairness and due process. His eyes found Marcus Ashford's.
But we also believe in accountability. Those who have been honest in their dealings have nothing to fear. The implication was clear. Marcus's face had gone from pale to red, his hands clenched at his sides. Lady Ashford's smile had become a rictus of barely controlled panic. Eliza crossed to Cassian's side as he descended from the small platform.
"Well done," she murmured. "That was perfect. Now we wait for the fallout."
They didn't have to wait long. 20 minutes later, Marcus Ashford intercepted them in a quiet corner of the ballroom. "That announcement," he said tightly. "It's directed at us. Don't pretend otherwise."
"I'm not sure what you mean," Cassian replied calmly.
"It's a standard business practice. Unless you have some reason to be concerned about an audit. You know damn well what I'm talking about. This is revenge for what happened at the ball, for the things I said."
"Is it? I thought it was responsible financial management." Cassian's voice was mild, but his eyes were hard.
"But since you've brought it up, yes, Marcus, I remember what you said. How you mocked my marriage, questioned my worth, implied that I bought my way into society. And yes, part of me wanted revenge for that. But this," he gestured broadly, "this isn't about revenge. It's about something much simpler." "What?" "Justice. For my parents. For what your father did to them."
Marcus's face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. The fire in 1797.
The consortium of merchants who arranged it. Your father was part of that conspiracy, Marcus. He helped murder my parents so he could steal their shipping contracts, and he built your entire family fortune on the proceeds of that crime." "That's insane. You have no proof." "I have Edmund's deathbed confession. I have business records showing the transfer of my father's contracts to your father immediately after the fire. I have correspondence between consortium members discussing the necessity of eliminating competition."
Cassian stepped closer. "I have everything, Marcus. The only question is what I do with it. You can't touch us. Those men are all dead, but their sons aren't. You inherited wealth built on murder, Marcus. How do you think society will react when that becomes public knowledge? How many of your allies will stand by you when they learn the Ashford fortune is blood money?" Marcus was shaking now, his composure completely shattered. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand what it feels like to have everything taken from you. I want you to know the fear of losing your home, your position, your future. I want you to feel a fraction of what I felt when your father murdered my parents." Cassian's voice was soft, deadly. "And then, when you were on the brink of complete ruin, I want you to remember that I could have destroyed you completely, but chose mercy instead." "Mercy?" "The audit will reveal your loan fraud. The bank will demand repayment. You'll have 30 days to produce funds you don't have. At that point, you'll have a choice. Sell the estate privately, maintain some dignity, keep some resources. Or fight me, go to court, have everything seized and auctioned publicly." He paused. "I'm offering you the private sale. Take it. Walk away with your reputation bruised but intact. Or fight me and lose everything, wealth, position, and the truth about your father's crimes." Marcus stared at him, the full weight of his situation finally registering. "You've won. Is that what you want to hear? You've completely and utterly won." "No, Marcus. I've simply stopped losing." Cassian turned away. "You have until January 15th to decide. Choose wisely." He walked away, leaving Marcus standing alone in the corner, his world crumbling around him. Eliza found Cassian on the terrace moments later, staring out at the snowy grounds. She wrapped her arms around him from behind. "How do you feel?" she asked softly. "I thought I'd feel triumphant, vindicated. Instead, I just feel—" He trailed off. "Empty? Tired. Like I've been carrying this weight for so long that now that it's gone, I don't know what to do with the space it left. You fill it with something better, with building instead of destroying, with living instead of surviving." She turned him to face her. "You did what you needed to do, Cassian. You stood up for yourself, for your parents, for your right to exist in this world without shame or apology. That's not revenge. That's justice." "Is it? Or am I just as ruthless as they are?" "There's a difference between being ruthless to protect yourself and being ruthless to harm others." They harmed first. You're responding. That's not the same thing. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I couldn't have done this without you. The planning, the strategy, the strength to actually follow through. You gave me all of it. No, you had it already. I just showed you it was there. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, the sounds of the ball muted behind them. We should go back inside, Eliza said finally. People will notice we're gone. Let them notice. Let them see that we're together, that we're strong, that we're exactly what we appear to be. And what's that? Partners, in every sense of the word. They returned to the ballroom hand in hand, and Eliza saw the exact moment society registered the change in them. Saw the whispers start, the speculative glances, the reassessment happening in real time. Lady Ashford approached them, her composure barely intact. Lady Blackmore, might I have a word? Eliza nodded, following the older woman to a quiet alcove. What my son said earlier, Lady Ashford began, her voice low and urgent. What your husband implied about my late husband, that cannot become public knowledge. Can't it? Please, I had no knowledge of any conspiracy. I married Richard Ashford in good faith. My children are innocent of their father's crimes. Don't punish them for things they didn't do. Eliza studied the woman's face, the fear, the desperation, the pride struggling against necessity. She saw herself 6 weeks ago, cornered and desperate, facing impossible choices. Lady Ashford, I'm not interested in punishing innocents, but I'm also not interested in protecting people who've spent years treating my husband as beneath them, who mocked him, excluded him, made his life difficult at every turn. I know, we were wrong. I was wrong. The admission clearly cost her. But my daughter's engagement, if this scandal breaks, Lord Pemberton will withdraw. She'll be ruined. Then perhaps you should have thought of that before your son decided to publicly humiliate us at your ball. He was drunk, foolish. I've already disciplined him. Lady Ashford, Eliza's voice was firm. Here's what's going to happen. The audit will proceed. The fraud will be discovered. The bank will demand repayment. Your family will sell the estate privately and quietly. You'll move somewhere smaller, live more modestly, and rebuild your lives with honesty instead of deception. And the truth about Richard remains private for now, as long as your family behaves with appropriate humility and respect going forward. Eliza paused. Your daughter can still marry Lord Pemberton if he's willing, but you'll do it without the Ashford estate as leverage. If he truly cares for her, he'll proceed anyway. If not, then she's better off without him. Lady Ashford's eyes filled with tears. You're being more merciful than we deserve. I'm being practical. Destroying you completely serves no purpose. Humbling you, teaching you consequences, ensuring you never underestimate a Blackmore again. Those serve purposes. Eliza softened slightly. I don't want to ruin your daughter, Lady Ashford. I just want your family to understand that actions have consequences, that you can't build empires on other people's suffering without eventually paying the price. We understand. I swear it. We understand. Good. Then we have an accord. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of triumph. Eliza watched as society's opinion shifted in real time. The same people who'd whispered about her desperate marriage now viewing her with respect, even fear. The same families who'd looked down on Cassian now seeking his favor. Lord Pemberton approached her near midnight. Lady Blackmore, I wanted to congratulate you on a magnificent event. Thank you, Lord Pemberton. I also wanted to say, what you've accomplished in such a short time is remarkable. You've taken a difficult situation and turned it into a position of strength. That takes courage and intelligence. It takes partnership. I couldn't have done any of this alone. Yes, I've noticed that about you and Lord Blackmore. The way you work together, support each other. He paused. It's rare, especially in marriages of convenience. Who says our marriage is convenient? He smiled. No one. Not anymore. That's my point. As the guests began departing, offering thanks and farewells, Eliza stood with Cassian at the entrance, feeling the weight of what they'd accomplished. They'd hosted the event of the season. They'd exposed the Ashfords' fraud. They'd demonstrated their strength, their unity, their right to stand among the territorial elite, not as supplicants, but as equals. The last carriage pulled away into the snowy night. The servants began cleaning up, and finally Eliza and Cassian were alone in the entrance hall. "We did it," she said softly. "You did it. This was all your strategy." "No, we did it together. You provided the leverage, the knowledge, the business acumen. I just helped you deploy it effectively." She leaned against him, exhausted but satisfied. "What happens now?" "Now we wait for the Ashfords to decide. Private sale or public humiliation. They'll choose the private sale. Lady Ashford is too smart to do otherwise. And after that? After that, we rebuild. Not the old power structures based on fear and manipulation. Something new, something better." She looked up at him. "We use our position to support people who deserve it. We invest in businesses that create value instead of extracting it. We prove that success doesn't require ruthlessness, just intelligence and integrity. You're talking about changing the entire territorial economy. I'm talking about changing our small part of it, leading by example rather than intimidation." She smiled. "Is that too ambitious? For anyone else?" "Yes. For you? I'm beginning to think nothing is too ambitious." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, pouring everything he couldn't say into the gesture. When they finally broke apart, Eliza saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Not calculation, not control, not careful measurement, just love, pure and uncomplicated and real. "I love you," he said, the words clearly difficult but necessary. "I don't know when it happened. Maybe at the ball when you defended me. Maybe in that inn when you held me while I fell apart. Maybe the moment you signed the contract and looked at me like I was worth negotiating with instead of just accepting. But I love you, Eliza, completely, terrifyingly, with everything I have." She felt tears prick her eyes. "I love you too. I have for weeks. I was just waiting for you to catch up." They stood in the entrance hall of Blackmore Estate, surrounded by the debris of their successful ball, and laughed, real, genuine laughter that echoed through the grand space. They'd come so far from that desperate negotiation in her father's drawing room, from the cold, mechanical arrangement they'd agreed to, from the careful distance they'd maintained for weeks. They'd survived scrutiny and scandal. They'd faced death and revelation. They'd waged war on the very society that had tried to break them, and they'd won. Not because they were the most powerful or the wealthiest or the best connected, but because they'd learned to fight together, to trust each other, to build something real from the fragments of their broken pasts. The Blackmores were no longer social climbers desperately seeking acceptance. They were a force, a partnership, a power unto themselves. And the territory would never be the same. And the territory would never be the same. The winter morning after the ball, Eliza woke to find Cassian already dressed, standing at the window of their shared bedroom, a change that had happened naturally in the days following their return from Whitmore Abbey. The separate quarters clause of their original contract had been silently, mutually abandoned. "You're up early," she said, sitting up against the pillows. He turned and she saw the letter in his hand. Marcus Ashford's response. It arrived an hour ago. She held out her hand. He brought the letter to her, sitting on the edge of the bed as she read. "Lord Blackmore, we accept your terms. The estate will be sold privately. We request 60 days rather than 30 to arrange matters properly and preserve what dignity remains. In exchange, we will publicly acknowledge our errors in judgment and withdraw from active participation in territorial social affairs for a period of 2 years. We trust this is acceptable. M. Ashford." 60 days, Eliza said thoughtfully. "He's asking for mercy. Should I give it to him? Do you want to?" Cassian was quiet for a moment. "A month ago, I would have said no. I would have pushed for maximum humiliation, maximum suffering, but now—" He looked at her. "You were right about revenge. It doesn't fill the emptiness. It just creates more emptiness. So what will you do? Grant the 60 days? Let them preserve some dignity. Not because they deserve it, but because I'm choosing to be better than they were." He took the letter back. "Is that weak? No, it's strong. Real strength is choosing mercy when you have the power to destroy." She pulled him down beside her. "Besides, we've already won.
Making them suffer more serves no purpose except satisfying spite. And you're better than that. We're better than that, he corrected. This was never just me, Eliza. This was us. She kissed him softly. Then we agree. 60 days. And we used that time to start building instead of destroying. The weeks that followed proved the truth of her words. Word of the Ashfords' downfall spread through the territory like wildfire. Not through scandal or gossip, but through careful, managed revelation. The bank audit discovered the loan fraud. The Ashfords chose to sell their estate privately rather than face public humiliation. And Lord and Lady Blackmore were praised for handling a difficult situation with discretion and professionalism. But it was what happened next that truly changed everything. 2 weeks after the ball, Eliza received a visitor. Lady Pemberton, formerly Miss Ashford, arrived at Blackmore Estate unannounced, her face composed but her eyes red from crying. Lady Blackmore, thank you for seeing me. Eliza gestured to a chair in the drawing room. Of course. How are you managing? Better than I deserve, thanks to your mercy. The younger woman's voice trembled slightly. Lord Pemberton insisted on proceeding with the marriage despite everything. He said he wanted me, not my family's estate. I didn't believe such things were possible. They're rare, but possible. My mother said you could have destroyed us completely, that you chose not to. Why? Eliza considered the question carefully. Because I know what it's like to be desperate, to face ruin through no fault of your own, to be judged for circumstances you didn't create. She paused. Your father made terrible choices. Your brother compounded them, but you were innocent. Punishing you for their crimes would have made me no better than they were. I wanted to thank you and to ask, Lady Pemberton hesitated, what you said at the ball, about building something better, about changing how things work in the territories. Did you mean it? Yes. Why? Because I want to help. Lord Pemberton and we've been discussing how to use his resources more effectively. Not just maintaining old systems, but creating new opportunities. We'd like to partner with you and Lord Blackmore, if you'll have us. Eliza felt something shift, the first domino falling in what would become a cascade of change. What did you have in mind? Over the next hour, Lady Pemberton outlined a proposal that was both ambitious and practical, using combined resources to establish a lending institution that would support small businesses and farmers rather than just wealthy landowners, creating educational opportunities for children regardless of social class, investing in infrastructure improvements that would benefit entire communities rather than just elite families. It's idealistic, Lady Pemberton admitted, but after watching my family's empire crumble, I realized that success built on exploitation is fundamentally unstable. We want to try something different. We? Cassian's voice came from the doorway. He'd been listening, Eliza realized. Lord Pemberton supports this? It was his idea initially. I simply refined it. She stood, curtsying respectfully. Lord Blackmore, I know my family wronged you terribly. I know my brother's actions at the ball were inexcusable. But if you can find it in yourself to work with us despite that history, we'd be honored. Cassian crossed to stand beside Eliza, his hand finding hers. Your father was part of the consortium that killed my parents. Did you know that? Lady Pemberton's face went white. No, Marcus mentioned something about old business disputes, but not... She stopped, clearly struggling. I didn't know. I'm so sorry. You're not responsible for your father's crimes, but you are responsible for choosing what you do with the inheritance he left you, tainted as it is. He paused. If you're sincere about building something better, about using your resources to create rather than extract, then yes, we'll work with you. Thank you. The words were barely a whisper. You won't regret this. After she left, Eliza turned to Cassian. That was generous. That was strategic. If we want to change how the territories operate, we need allies. And nothing creates stronger allies than giving people second chances when they expect condemnation. When did you become so wise? When I married someone who taught me that mercy is a tool, not a weakness. The partnership with the Pembertons opened unexpected doors. Other families, seeing the collaboration, began approaching with their own proposals. Not everyone was sincere. Some were clearly trying to curry favor or protect their own interests. But enough were genuine that within 6 weeks, Eliza and Cassian found themselves at the center of a growing coalition dedicated to reshaping territorial economics and social structures. They established the Blackmore Development Fund, which provided low-interest loans to farmers and tradespeople. They partnered with educational reformers to create schools accessible to children from all backgrounds. They invested in road improvements, bridge construction, and infrastructure projects that benefited entire regions rather than just wealthy estates. And with each initiative, their reputation shifted further. No longer were they seen as social climbers or desperate opportunists. They were becoming something else entirely: leaders, visionaries, people who wielded power not for personal gain, but for collective benefit. But it was in the kitchen at Blackmore Estate where the most profound change occurred. 3 months after the ball, Eliza arrived to find Mrs. Brennan and 3 kitchen maids teaching cooking techniques to a group of 10 young women, daughters of tenant farmers and tradespeople, girls who would normally have no access to such training. "My lady," Mrs. Brennan looked flustered. "I should have asked permission, but these girls came asking if we might teach them, and I thought—" "You thought correctly." Eliza removed her shawl, rolling up her sleeves. "What are we teaching today?" "Bread making, my lady. The basics." "Excellent. I'll help." Word spread. Within weeks, the kitchen training program had expanded to include not just cooking, but household management, basic accounting, even reading and writing for those who lacked such skills. The young women who completed the program found employment in the finest households across the territory, not as scullery maids, but as trained professionals commanding respect and decent wages. "You're changing lives," Cassian observed one afternoon, watching from the kitchen doorway as Eliza demonstrated pastry technique to an enraptured audience. "I'm sharing knowledge. There's a difference." "No, you're proving that power doesn't have to mean exclusion, that success doesn't require keeping others down." He smiled. "You're teaching them what you taught me, that strength comes from building up, not tearing down." That evening, as they dressed for yet another social function, this time a dinner with regional magistrates to discuss legal reforms, Eliza caught Cassian watching her in the mirror. "What is it?" she asked. "I was just thinking about the day I walked into your father's drawing room with that marriage contract. I thought I knew exactly what I was getting, a convenient wife with the right pedigree who would give me social legitimacy. And instead I got a partner who's transformed not just my life, but the entire way I think about power, success, and what it means to build something lasting." He crossed to her, turning her to face him. "You've given me something I didn't even know I was missing, Eliza." "What's that?" "Purpose beyond survival, vision beyond revenge. A reason to build instead of just defend." He touched her face gently. "I spent my whole life trying to prove I belonged in their world. You taught me to build our own world instead, one with better rules, better values, better possibilities." "We built it together," she corrected. "I just provided the blueprint. You provided the foundation and the will to actually construct it. Are we really going to spend our entire marriage arguing about who deserves more credit?" "Probably. We're both too stubborn to concede." He laughed, pulling her close. "I love you, Eliza Blackmore. Every stubborn, brilliant, infuriating inch of you. And I love you. Every calculating, passionate, surprisingly tender inch of you." The dinner that night proved to be a turning point of a different kind. Halfway through the meal, Lord Chief Magistrate Winthrop stood to make an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor of sharing some remarkable news. His Majesty's government has been observing the economic and social initiatives undertaken in our territory with great interest. The Development Fund, the educational reforms, the infrastructure investments, all of it has caught the attention of the highest levels." He paused for effect, clearly enjoying the suspense. "It is my privilege to announce that Lord Cassian Blackmore has been appointed to the Territorial Advisory Council, a position advising the Crown on economic development across all frontier regions. This appointment recognizes not just his business acumen, but his vision for a more prosperous, equitable society." The room erupted in applause. Eliza watched Cassian's face, the shock, the disbelief, the slow dawning of realization that this was real. The grandson of a coal merchant, the man who'd bought his title and spent years being looked down upon by society, had just been given one of the most influential positions in territorial governance. Later, after accepting congratulations and fielding questions, they escaped to the terrace. The spring air was warm, carrying the scent of early blooms. "This is insane," Cassian said, still looking dazed. "6 months ago, I was barely tolerated in society. Now I'm advising the crown? 6 months ago, you were trying to fit into their systems. Now you're building new ones. That's what they're recognizing. Not that you've learned to play their game, but that you've created a better game entirely." "We created it, you and I together." "Yes, but you're the one they're appointing to the council. You're the one they trust to lead. Only because you taught me how to lead, how to inspire rather than intimidate, how to build coalitions instead of just accumulating leverage." He pulled her close. "I can't do this without you, Eliza. The council position, the reforms, any of it. I need you beside me." "Then it's fortunate I have no intention of going anywhere." The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Cassian's appointment meant increased scrutiny, but also increased influence. Doors that had been closed suddenly opened. Ideas that had been dismissed as too radical were suddenly taken seriously. And everywhere they went, people who had once looked down on them now sought their favor, their partnership, their approval. But the real validation came from an unexpected source. 6 weeks after Cassian's appointment, Marcus Ashford requested a meeting. Eliza received him in the drawing room at Blackmore Estate, Cassian at her side. "Lord Blackmore." "Lady Blackmore." Marcus looked older, worn by the past months. "Thank you for seeing me." "What can we do for you, Marcus?" Cassian's tone was neutral, neither hostile nor friendly. I owe you both an apology. A real one, not the hollow words I sent in that letter." Marcus took a breath. "What my father did to your parents was evil. What I did, mocking you, treating you as beneath me, trying to humiliate you at our ball, was inexcusable. I spent my whole life benefiting from crimes I didn't commit, but also never questioned. And when you forced me to face that reality, I hated you for it." "And now?" Eliza asked quietly. "Now I understand you gave me a gift. You could have destroyed my entire family. You could have exposed my father's crimes publicly, ruined my sister's marriage, left us with nothing. Instead, you gave us a chance to rebuild with honesty, to learn from our mistakes, to be better." He met Cassian's eyes. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I understand now. What you did wasn't cruelty, it was justice and mercy, both at once." Cassian was quiet for a long moment. Then, "What are you doing now, Marcus? After selling the estate?" "I'm working, actually working, for the first time in my life, managing a shipping concern in the eastern settlements, starting over with nothing but my name and whatever reputation I can rebuild honestly." "And how's that going?" "Harder than I expected, humbling, but better, more real." Marcus gave a wry smile. "Turns out when you have to earn success instead of inheriting it, it actually means something." "Good." Cassian stood, offering his hand. "Then perhaps there's hope for you after all." Marcus stared at the extended hand, clearly surprised, then gripped it firmly. "Thank you for the lesson, for the mercy, for showing me what real strength looks like." After he left, Eliza wrapped her arms around Cassian from behind. "That was generous. That was necessary. If we want to change the territory, we can't just punish the old guard. We have to give them a path to redemption." He turned to face her. "Besides, he was right. What we did to the Ashfords was both justice and mercy, punishment and opportunity. That's the balance we need to find in everything we do." The spring turned to summer, and with it came the formal establishment of their first major initiative, the Territorial Opportunity Institute. Located in a renovated building halfway between Blackmore Estate and the city, it offered training, education, and financial literacy to anyone willing to learn, regardless of background or gender. The opening ceremony drew hundreds, not just the elite families, but farmers, tradespeople, servants, and young people hungry for opportunities that had never existed before. Eliza stood at the podium, looking out at the diverse crowd, and felt the weight of the moment. 6 months ago, she began, I stood in my father's drawing room facing ruin. No money, no prospects, no future. I was saved by a marriage contract, a transaction that gave me survival in exchange for social legitimacy. She paused, finding Cassian's eyes in the crowd. But what started as survival became something else, a partnership. a shared vision, a commitment to building something better than what we'd inherited. She gestured to the building behind her. This institute represents that vision. It says that opportunity shouldn't be limited by birth or gender or social class. That talent exists everywhere, but access to training and resources doesn't. We're here to change that. The applause was thunderous. As Eliza stepped down from the podium, she was surrounded by people thanking her, sharing their stories, describing how the institute had already changed their lives. One young woman caught her hand. "Lady Blackmore, I'm Martha. I was one of the first girls in your kitchen training program. I remember you. You had a gift for pastries."
"Yes, my lady, and because of what you taught me, I've been hired as an assistant pastry chef at the governor's residence. Me, a farmer's daughter who couldn't read 6 months ago, working in the finest kitchen in the territory." Tears streamed down her face. "You changed my life." "No, Martha, you changed your own life. I just opened a door. You walked through it."
But as Eliza watched the young woman disappear into the crowd, she understood the deeper truth. They had changed lives. She and Cassian together, not through charity or condescension, but by recognizing potential and providing pathways, by building systems that elevated rather than exploited. That night, exhausted but satisfied, they returned to Blackmore Estate. The house felt different now, warmer, more alive. No longer the austere fortress Cassian had maintained, but a home filled with purpose and possibility. In their bedroom, Eliza stood at the window overlooking the grounds. Cassian joined her, his arms wrapping around her waist. "Do you ever think about that first night?" he asked. "When I brought you here and you looked so small and alone in those vast rooms?" "I think about how terrified I was, how certain I was that I'd made a mistake, how convinced that this marriage was just a prettier form of ruin. And now? Now I think it was the best decision I ever made. Not because you saved me, but because together we saved each other." He turned her to face him. "I've been thinking about our contract, the clause about dissolving the marriage after 1 year." Eliza's heart stuttered. "What about it?" "It's been 8 months. In 4 months, you'll have the option to leave, to take the income I promised and build your own independent life. Is that what you want?" "No." The word came out fierce, certain. "But I need to know it's what you want too. I need to know you're staying because you choose to, not because you feel obligated by a contract you signed when you had no other options." Eliza took his face in her hands. "Cassian Blackmore, I'm staying because I love you. Because what we've built together means more to me than any independence I could claim alone. Because you're my partner, my equal, my home." She kissed him softly. "I choose you. Not because I have to, because I want to. Every day. For the rest of my life." "Then marry me again. Not a contract signed in desperation, but real vows made freely. Choose me knowing you have every other option available." "Are you proposing to your own wife?" "I'm asking the woman I love to truly become my wife. Not legally, we're already that. But emotionally, spiritually, completely." Eliza felt tears stream down her face. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They held a second ceremony 6 weeks later, small and intimate, attended only by those who mattered most. Mrs. Henshaw wept throughout. The Pembertons stood as witnesses. Even Harrison, the stoic butler, was seen wiping his eyes. This time, when Cassian said, "I do," his voice rang with certainty, not calculation. This time, when Eliza said, "I do," it was a choice made freely, not a survival tactic. And when they kissed, sealing vows made from love rather than necessity. Everyone present understood they were witnessing something rare, a marriage that had started as transaction but transformed into partnership, survival that had evolved into purpose, calculation that had become devotion. The year that followed brought continued growth and change. The Territorial Opportunity Institute expanded to 3 locations. The Development Fund helped launch over 100 new businesses. The educational reforms spread to neighboring regions, and slowly but steadily, the old power structures built on exploitation and exclusivity gave way to new systems based on opportunity and merit. Not everyone approved. Some of the older families resented the changes, fought against reforms that threatened their traditional advantages. There were setbacks and disappointments, moments when progress stalled or reversed. But Eliza and Cassian faced each challenge the same way they'd faced everything else, together. One evening, nearly a year after their second ceremony, they stood on the terrace at Blackmore Estate watching the sunset. Eliza's hand rested on her swelling belly. The child they'd conceived not from duty, but from love. Not to secure succession, but to create family. "Do you ever miss it?" Cassian asked. "The simplicity of just surviving, when the goals were clear and the battles were straightforward?" "No, because I've learned something important. Surviving is necessary, but it's not living. Living requires risk, vulnerability, building things that matter even when you're not certain they'll succeed." She placed his hand on her belly, feeling their child move beneath. "This, all of this, is living, and it's so much better than just surviving. Even when it's hard? Especially when it's hard, because that's when it means the most." They stood in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Below them, the estate grounds stretched out, no longer austere but alive with gardens Eliza had planted, paths they'd walked together, spaces they'd claimed as theirs. In the distance, lights began appearing in the windows of tenant cottages, families living and working on Blackmore lands under fair contracts and decent wages, building their own legacies. "We did it," Cassian said softly. "We actually did it." "Did what?" "Changed everything. Ourselves. Our world. The very definition of what power and success mean in the territories. We're not finished yet. There's still so much to do." "I know, but we've proven it's possible. That two people who started with nothing but desperation and determination can build something that matters. Something that lasts." Eliza leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "We built it because we were desperate and determined and together." "Together," he echoed. "Always together." As darkness fell over Blackmore Estate, they remained on the terrace, two people who'd found each other in their darkest moments and forged something luminous from shared survival, who'd learned that real strength wasn't never needing anyone, but trusting someone enough to need them. That true power wasn't dominating others, but lifting them up. That the greatest legacy wasn't wealth or status, but the lives you touched and the systems you changed. In a world that had demanded they conform or be destroyed, they'd chosen a third path: transformation. Not just of themselves, but of everything around them. Eliza Thornfield had walked into Cassian Blackmore's study with nothing to lose and everything to fear. She'd signed a contract that saved her life but seemed to doom her soul. Cassian Blackmore had offered that contract seeking legitimacy he thought could be bought, armor against a world that had always made him prove his worth. What they'd discovered instead was that the best partnerships aren't built on what you can take from each other, but on what you can build together. That love isn't weakness, but the foundation of genuine strength. That changing the world starts with being willing to change yourself. Standing on that terrace, with their child growing between them and their shared legacy spreading across the territories, they understood the truth that had eluded them both for so long. Survival is necessary, success is satisfying, but partnership, true, equal partnership built on trust and respect and love, that's what transforms survival into triumph, success into meaning, existence into life. They'd started as desperate strangers bound by contract. They'd become partners who changed not just their own fates, but the fate of everyone around them. And in a frontier society where reputation meant everything and vulnerability meant death, they'd proven that the most powerful force of all was two people who refused to face the world alone. The territories would remember the Blackmores not for their wealth or their titles or their social position. They'd remember them as the partnership that rewrote the rules. The marriage that started as transaction and became transformation. The two people who proved that when you stop trying to survive in someone else's world and start building your own, anything becomes possible. Together, they'd forged a legacy that would outlast them both. Together, they'd won. And the victory was sweeter than either had ever imagined possible.